Hello again, and I hope you are not too tired yet of all this intensive work you have put through. I have very carefully read your program and tried to understand what comes from that course, but indeed I do assume that we won't want to take 1.5 hours to introduce your backgrounds on research methodology, so we will not have any time left. But just to start, let's do the after lunch exercise. How many of you managed to read the papers I suggested as the preliminary reading before the course?
Which ones here it is, because we have read so many.
There were 3 papers I remember, 2 of mine, so the most important for me to understand for today's what I have prepared is that if anybody have read the papers, at least one of them, which was my papers, not one, okay, then we probably want to do it if not too many people, so that first of all I can tell her that I will try to pick up the speed somewhere in the middle, so that you know that the papers on the background of the first part are there, have been there, and you can always go back to them. They are available for you, and then the rest of the people who have read the papers, or the Estonian people who have taken my course just this spring, the full course, the full semester course, then for the rest of the people, if something gets a bit messed up, and if you don't have time to ask me the questions today as we have intense schedule, so in your groups, these people, locate these people. Who are the people who have taken the course? Show.
Not too many.
Not so many, dear. No? Okay, not so many of that mixed methods course here, at least for now. Then you can do it. I was suggesting that you squeeze them after the course if you have the puzzling questions as they have submitted their assignments. But anyway, let me get back to that slide. Did you have just a glimpse of it? If we talk about mixed methods, then I promise you there is no common understanding what actually it exactly stands for. Different people from different traditions, different countries, different disciplines of research understand quite differently what it stands for, mixed methods. But as this new tradition develops, at least some kind of agreement has to be there to use these big labels, otherwise it would be totally pointless. So, and this slide is just to make sure that we, the very broad sense of what it stands for if we talk about mixed methods, at least when these people who are in community of mixed methods think that they are somehow contributing to mixed methods development, it comes with a basic assumption that if in one project, either smaller or bigger research project, if you somehow combine the qualitative aspects and the quantitative aspects, then it goes with the label of mixed methods research. If you combine 2 qualitative approaches, which is totally fine to do and maybe very reasonable, but then at least in this community who write and talk about mixed methods research, that the label wouldn't be appropriate to use. Or if you combine 2 quantitative approaches or different data collection methods from quantitative side, for example, the tests and the structured interviews, so you also don't label it as a mixed methods research. But as I said, there are indeed, as the field is developing, there are definitions by prominent researchers given different traditions. We are getting to these definitions hopefully in the second part of today's, I would say today will be probably more like a lecture, if you agree. especially if you haven't read, if too many people haven't read the papers. So today I will try to get you through the basic ideas, and then in the end of today's lecture, we just have to agree what we do tomorrow, because from my side it's totally open. As I said, I can have like 40 hours of course on mixed methods. But here we have 4 hours, so we have to. But I think that maybe if we can go through the basic things today, maybe we can have more of a workshop tomorrow. But it depends if you want to, if you will be able to read at least one research paper by tomorrow morning, or then if we want to take from tomorrow morning the one piece of time to read it. So, but let's get. You will be in a better position to decide in the end of today's lecture anyway. So, but just to see. So, something about quantitative, something about qualitative. Let's proceed with that idea about under the label of mixed methods research designs. And the other thing I want to point out that this plural, the designs, is very important for me, because if we come to the idea that we can mix somehow the qualitative and quantitative, actually for me it's not correct in abstract sense to talk about mixed method design, because there is no one design which you could call mixed methods. If you have your one project, indeed you can say that my project done like this was using a mixed method design, because but it's one piece, one exemplar, one thing, but practically it's the endless ways you can combine qualitative and quantitative ways. And if we talk about the designs, then you can guess that there are more typical ways to combine, which more people have used already, which you can find some notes or references from the textbooks. Actually, I can bring tomorrow the textbooks as well, but there is a list. Those how many people have actually, I already looked a couple of days ago that there were some people in Moodle on my course. So then the other, note that if you are not yet, and if you, but just to say aloud that it's I very warmly welcome you to join the Moodle. It doesn't make any obligations to you. It's just that you can get access if you want to, and if you don't want to, you can always register out of the course. It's just a pile of materials. I hope quite systematically up there, and so that there you can find much more materials for the background, going step by step towards the basics. But then, so that it's practically quite open what we talk when we talk about mixed methods research designs. They can be very different. And the purposes for mixing can be also very different. But we come to these purposes as, from my point of view, the most important is to understand, not to start from the what do you think, to declare that I want to do this research as a mixed methods project, and then I start to think what actually I want to study. You know, quite many people seems to start, I want to do qualitative piece of research, and then I start to think that, but I suggest you first think what you want to study, then decide what kind of methods could be better, and then you ask, if you feel that you are tempted to mix and match qualitative and quantitative, always ask from yourself that, do I understand why? And that's we are going to go through. So that these slides, as I promised Hanneliisa, have you already put them up? So that if you want to, I would prefer if you just follow. But they are by now. This set of slides is up on the web page without the Moodle, so you can access if you like. So hopefully no paper needed. so you can just have an idea that you don't have to copy any of the text which is on the slides, so that but the comments indeed, so you can just have a bit of that background from where I'm coming from. Maybe it's important. Sometimes people think if people talk about mixed methods, then the person who talks, if he or she comes from which side. So my background is from quantitative, so that I was trained more like a quantitative researcher. I still feel more at home with the quantitative part of data analysis, but I'm kind of inspired from the ideas from the qualitative side, and I feel quite most comfortable today in the middle, so with the mixed methods, as you can see. So, but still, if you would ask, then the projects I have done myself as a research pieces, they are still more biased towards quantitative approach. But it might make a big difference actually if you listen to somebody else or read somebody else's book, how she or he will talk about mixed methods. If her or his roots are coming from qualitative side, so the approach could be quite different. So that's one thing also to mention. This is very important slide. If you just browse the eyes from up to down and down to up, are these things familiar? Because it's not about mixed methods. It's about, from my point of view, about all empirical research, whatever kind of methodology you use. It could be good if you would be able to differentiate these kind of methodological aspects and have some ability to deconstruct your approach. Anything you want to ask about these labels or titles or whatever? Common the others. If you think about ethnography, you can start to think about what is the typical sampling logic, what is the typical analysis logic, what is the mental model or paradigm. The roots of this methodology come from, so that the top level indeed is more for, I would say, if you operate or if you study already on the PhD level, then you probably won't, especially if you go for a mixed methods project. So you have to operate on that theoretical mental model paradigm level. People will expect you to, at least to some. If you do your master thesis, I would suggest to try to avoid this, unless you are very, very interested and very, very self-confident that you have read yourself into the deep philosophical roots. Otherwise, it's like becomes, always, if you use the big labels but you haven't read the original text, you have only the textbook, like that kind of paragraph of knowledge about this big thing, it will be the biggest hook actually to anybody in the commission to ask. And give me please 3 concrete examples. How did you apply this idea in your research? And here you are, actually can bring up, so that it isn't the best kind of test question. If somebody asks, if you attempted to use some big label, try to ask yourself and what are the at least 2, better 3 concrete kind of ways how you have applied this idea in your piece of research. If you can't answer, just skip the label. But it's your choice indeed. Anyway, any questions? Everything clear from here? If somebody tells me that she or he did the interview study or the observational study, or tells you, what kind of thoughts you will have related to that scheme? Or just... He or she then defines her research on the data collection level. If you are more into serious research, you would ask that, okay, you did collect the data by interviewing or by observations, but what was the general framework for the data collection? How did you build up, or how did you design your study as a big plan of the study? So sometimes actually this is unrelevant question, because if somebody is doing BA level piece of research, most probably I would tell that don't even expect him or her to actually do the proper experiment or the design as such. Good if he or she managed actually to compose a more or less adequate questionnaire and collect more or less adequate data, so that but even if you are kind of experienced researcher, sometimes the research question is such a small scale, so that you can only think that a small set of data without a big fuss about research design is enough to answer these questions. So that, but definitely not for a PhD study. If somebody would tell me that my PhD project was an observational study, I would say that no way. It's just too much missing or too naive approach to the PhD level research. So that the main importance is for me here is to be able to differentiate between these two levels: the general strategy, like you have had, experimental, ethnographic, and if you now think how do you go about the mixed methods here in this scheme? Any ideas? We can go and discuss further. Even somewhere between here, the above, so that because you could combine the survey and the case studies, for example, and that gives the mixed method design for your study. Which is the qualitative, which is the quantitative, then the survey with the case studies.
Survey is a quantitative method.
Yeah. Traditionally, survey is a quantitative, as traditionally taken,
Yeah.
and the case studies.
Open question.
It might involve some open questions sometimes, or but traditionally the survey is like a structured approach. So the case studies traditionally are qualitative, so that if you decide in one bigger project to combine survey and case studies, either ways you could do the case studies first and then survey for certain purposes to decide, or the other way around, first the survey and then the case studies. Then you could call it as a combined design or a mixed method design, but there are different ways we are going, but that was the simplest. And in that sense, it is then you have a certain mixed methods design combining these and these strategies from that, and it comes, the mixed methods comes like an umbrella term, and actually to go to the end, right, to start with the end. Actually, the decision if you want to use the label mixed methods or not depends on the context. You can very easily think that I was doing a nice piece of mixed methods research, but for certain audiences you just prefer not to have all this terminology in. You just tell into more traditional ways.
If you have, for example, usually a qualitative method with coding, what we learned today from Geraldine, and you then have like frequency of certain words, then you have like the transition to numbers again, but it doesn't make it also then a quantitative.
It is actually some authors in mixed methods field, they call it gray area studies. They are not clearly mixed methods. They are not pure qualitative and quantitative design. So I will go to the idea of continuum anyway quite soon, so that there is no clear line. That's for sure. As I say, that you could have a textbook examples. That's a perfect kind of clear mixed methods design. That's a clear pure, but the real life is somewhere in between always, and the decision if you want to use the labels or not depends on the audience most often, because if they know about, if you want to publish in the International Journal of Mixed Methods Research, what would your decision be? Will you use the terminology of the mixed methods field? Absolutely, they wouldn't accept otherwise. They even want you to reflect on your use of methodology to get it published there. Not only your results, but your something new about mixed methods. What did you learn when you applied this? If you want to publish in your research area a very traditional journal, it might very easily be the case that the editors wouldn't understand or even know anything about more detailed mixed methods terminology. And if you would just use the traditional terminology kind of common to that field, you could very easily get published your mixed methods piece. But if you take the heavy terminology from that field, which the editors are not familiar with, you probably will be in trouble. So that in that sense, it's one thing is what you actually do. The other way is that what kind of, for what audience, for what purposes, what kind of terminology and this kind of context you build around when you write it up and when you present. So that's also quite clear. And that's most important thing for the beginning to the end. If we once have agreed, at least from my side, you probably cannot reconvince me that there are different ways, very different ways how to combine, for what purposes, and then how to combine qualitative and quantitative to actually get to your good ends of the research. Then the more creative you are, the better. But indeed, in research, you can guess that you don't born to be properly creative. So you have to learn a lot of the basics. And if you have experienced the weaknesses of the traditional approaches, only then actually you will be convincing enough. If you just declare that these gurus in these textbooks said that now we all use the mixed methods, then you probably won't convince most of the people. But if you start from my main approach was because of my aims for the research were this and that, I choose the experimental design as the main one, but I had to strengthen this design because I saw these and these kind of weaknesses coming in, considering my research question into that traditional design. So I blended in some ideas from that, and then you show and point out exactly why and how did you go for it. So that's kind of convincing, even for those who have never heard or who can never liked the idea of mixed methods. So you have to know, again, from the beginning, that in the boards, in the universities all around the world, there are sitting people who thinks that it's not good thing to do. Still, even though that this in younger generation people, I would even say it's becoming more too popular because people are not yet ripe or ready. They don't have this informed position yet, but they already want to combine whatever. But you have to know that in the commissions, there's some people might always say that you just can't. They come from different paradigms, the quantitative and qualitative, and it's just not right whatsoever to combine them. So you have to have a very good argument to reconvince. Maybe you won't reconvince these concrete people, but what you have to do, if there are sitting 3 or 5 people, it's enough to convince most of them. So if you do the new things, don't try to convince everybody. Try to convince the bigger part of them and leave it so. Any questions here? for the starter. Okay, let's leave us with that introduction, what it is about mixed methods. I have just a bit of steps, what we are going through there. We try to have a very quick look from where this dispute comes from, and then we try to have a quick look on this general framework of conceptualizing any piece of research. And these topics are covered by these two articles of mine, pretty much, which should be available for you. So if we do it very quickly now and some things are just puzzling you and you didn't understand them quite right, go back and read the articles. And indeed, I can promise that I can answer and do some intensive consultation for all 40 people. But if very concrete questions, I'm always happy to try, at least if it pops into my mailbox about mixed methods, so that if it doesn't take too much of like 2 days to get into that big project, then I will try to answer the more concrete questions if you will have them. Anyway, then just a glimpse that this dispute about either combining or doing either or the quantitative or qualitative approach in social and human research, so that it comes back to the early centuries, but it got heated up some around 60s, 70s, past century. That people are calling this era paradigm wars. It's cooling down a bit by now already. For 10 years it's not so much, nobody is actually using the paradigm war label, but there are people who are still fixed in certain point of that timeline, so who haven't gone further with the ideas, with the newest ideas on the mixed methods field. So they stay with the idea that, okay, maybe qualitative and qualitative ways of doing research are both valid, but don't ever mix them because it won't be good in any sense. But if you read these textbooks from these general textbooks, not the mixed methods textbooks then, yes? The general, the research methods in education, research methods in psychology, research methods for whatever, so that typically they try to picture these two different sets, that even if they have two chapters, two big parts of the textbook, the qualitative and quantitative, so you will have this, that in the one side there is this qualitative, which is this, and quantitative this, and you can have a more. Just the slide was finishing that. The fun part starts from here, because this is quite often fixed to the side, but these labels, they swap the sides in the textbooks. Depends what I mentioned, that from which point of view somebody is writing. If I'm more into quantitative, then or stand for quantitative, so that it's not so straightforward. Anyway, have you ever heard about, I would say, the most influential authors in that field who initiated, or whose approach initiated pretty much these paradigm wars, was the Cuba and Lincoln, American authors. They wrote actually their big pieces everywhere, but the most importantly in the Sage Handbook of Qualitative Research. It is a bit of, we don't have time, but you have, if you go to Moodle, there are some copies of the early papers. Anyway, they suggested that there are two paradigms at that point of time, at least: the constructivist belief system, which is the new one, and the conventional beliefs about how to do research. Would you give me the label? Anybody? Instead of conventional beliefs, there is one big label for that one, that paradigm. Yeah, that's it. So that more commonly you would hear about positivist paradigm, which is older or ruling at that point of time in the middle of the past century or further, and then the new set of belief system around or underneath of the constructivist beliefs, and pretty much the approach, even though the Cuba and Lincoln have always said that they have never said that quantitative and qualitative data couldn't be mixed within one project, but if you read their pieces, it's quite clearly like this, that on that level, if you just can't do otherwise, because some data just come, even if you work in this kind of paradigm, yes, the positivist, structured approach, quantitative survey research or experimental control setting, so that you sometimes need to collect the open-ended, unstructured data because it comes from a life. Somebody has written some text and you want to use it as a data. But what in that model you would do about this kind of data? Quite quickly, you will come from that to that point. So you have the open, for example, the media text, unstructured text, or the people's conversations. You want to work. You work neatly in this paradigm. So what you do is you start to code it right away. So you apply. You take from theory. In extreme case, you take from theory the keywords or the units of the meaning, and you just try to start to count how many times this unit is present in this text, and you will have, so you actually ignore the rest. You only look at that structured piece of information. And the other way around, then, if you work in this scheme on that qualitative paradigm, then indeed, if you go to do about ethnography in a company or in a school, you can't escape. Some of the life is in numbers. The salaries, the marks in school. You can give me a lot of examples so that these people, the qualitative researchers, they just have to deal somehow with these numbers, but then in this model they won't start to actually get into serious statistics, but they interpret this or question from where these kind of results come from. Are they just or are they not just, whatever. So that was this kind of model which was very strongly advocated all around the world. For example, it was 98 when I went to UK to Cambridge, and that was the model I was taught about the methodology. So that was actually the kind of trigger. I didn't accept that model at that point of time, and I started to argue and trying to get into that. And that's from the very beginning. So the model is there. Many people think in the framework of this model. Still, you will see them all around the world. But all this mixed methods idea is built on the not agreeing with this model. So, what's the current state? Than today, or yes, today. Even though there are these people who still live in this model, the paradigm, quantitative, qualitative, these kind of forefront people who take these ideas, methodological ideas further, they kind of they don't argue anymore. You won't get many methodological papers about these paradigms. Even though I went to the conference just now on mixed methods, and one paper at least was still about the confrontation of the paradigms, which was I was sitting and thinking that was 15 years ago. But anyway, so that for some people it's still new. They get into it and they code. But anyway, most often. The biggest trend is actually toward the fast developing the qualitative research borrows from art, and the mixed methods borrows from that qualitative, fast developing qualitative ways. But it's also, as the quantitative side, it's actually maybe a bit more difficult to see as the quantitative side is developing also quite fast, with all these big data, which actually you can't use anymore the traditional statistical methods because the databases are so big. They are not collected for the research purposes. Can you think what I'm referring for? The big, huge databases which are just there. All these, every time you use your credit card, every time you use your customer card, the lots of data. Every time you click in the web, the logs are there. So these you can. But actually, I should say that this kind of the new methods from the quantitative side are slower coming into the mixed methods community. It's still like a quite traditional statistical approaches that people combine there, but it is a potential. So if you want to be if you feel that you're coming more from the quantitative side, and if you want to become evangelist in methodological, so look for the possibilities to combine these new quantitative techniques with some qualitative aspects, and I can assure you will be a big name in the field. So anyway. If we don't agree with this paradigm model, which I said that I haven't agreed from the very beginning, that the real life is or should follow these two very clearly separated paradigms. So what's the answer then? Should we just go and collect our data, not to discuss anything about the theoretical or philosophical level, what is behind of any the worldview? The answer is no, we shouldn't do that, but we should have some other framework to actually conceptualize how it works, from where these understandings comes, because I honestly do believe that even if we don't read much on the level of philosophy, we do, as a human beings, we do have certain worldview which directs our understanding and how do we understand the world works, or how to, as a researchers, how can we actually get our answers, and this discussion is pretty much there quite all the time. So you can see three different ways, but in a way or the other, different authors in the field who haven't fixed their standpoint to that paradigm model are moving gradually towards the idea of continuum, which I already mentioned, so that not the two separate paradigms or three separate paradigms, as you can see from here. It's just a set of labels. We had this positivist and constructivist. At some point, the critical theoretical as a third paradigm was added to Kuba and Lincoln. As you see that the 94, they added the third, so that they extended their model from two paradigms to three, a little step towards the continuum idea. But there were other authors early days. They all were talking, almost all were talking about two paradigms, just that, as I said, the labels are different, but the ideas behind those are quite the same anyway on the early days. Here you can see that the Kuba and Lincoln had done what? So they have extended their original two paradigm model into the five. I haven't had time to read the latest. If they have had it some more, then just if somebody happens to read, send me a note. I can extend my slide, but I just have been too busy with my research vice rector position and haven't read the latest papers. But anyway, what do you think? Actually, the Kuba and Lincoln are talking about five paradigms. Just read quickly and then say how many paradigms they still have in that sense.
Two.
Pretty much the two paradigms which are still incommensurable, but within one, because the qualitative researchers didn't want to assign to the constructivist paradigm. They said we have different options, so it was extended, and the quantitative ones even more didn't agree to be all positivists, so that they extended their positivist, but it's still like, at least by 2005, they hadn't really some movement towards the more flexible model from the original one, but still there is a big line in their understanding. Separate set. These are the proponents of mixed methods research. At some point, then they said that no, it's not right. They had indeed many arguments why these two paradigms are not good enough. And they built up a third one, but not the critical theory or something, but these authors come from more methodological than a worldview position. They built up the third paradigm called mixed methods paradigm, which is quite absurd from my point of view, so I don't think about mixed methods as a third paradigm myself, but that's very strongly there. Many authors on the mixed methods field clearly write that now we have three paradigms, that let the qualitative tradition be there, quantitative tradition be there. We have a new community of mixed methods researchers. We borrow, but we don't care too much if the others accept us or doesn't accept us. We are kind of neat community. Indeed, in that sense, if you propose this new paradigm as a mixed methods, you have to have the worldview background position. So that's a modest list of the ones which have been proposed on the philosophical level. Most commonly, the pragmatism is then proposed as the philosophical background where we get our roots when we do the mixed methods approaches. But also the post-positivism, whatever, don't ask me where it ends or where it starts, but the label is there all the time. So I would suggest don't use as your own label the post-positivism. It's another big hook. So it's very difficult, at least for me, even though I have tried to explain what it is or where it starts and where it ends. Anyway, some forms of realism like critical realism, or then totally new paradigm for mixed methods and coming from a totally different, as you can see, the transformative emancipatory. Can you understand the ladenness of this word, the emancipatory? You understand? Different people come from different languages. To free person, to make them to understand better, to help them to have a more voice, more right to decide about their research, so that this kind of framework is this having on a broad sense this critical theory roots coming from that if the traditional research is neutral, objective, out there, everybody should be able to get to the same results, then with these approaches, it's totally in the other end. It's local, it's for very practical good for some groups the research should serve, and it should be, the other good word is, anybody with in a parallel with emancipatory, the other one is empowerment, isn't it? Yeah, well, so those people who have worked in these traditions or read more, so they know. So there are different frameworks for mixed methods proposed, and if the people are actually believing strongly into mixed methods as a third paradigm, they propose their framework as the one proper one, the best. But if you go further with this idea, so you would get to that idea that there were some authors from that idea, but if you go further and start from that you wouldn't accept at all this paradigm, either 3 or 2 or whatever labels, then you get to that more of that continuum idea as a big framework. I probably will skip a couple of slides from here. You can have these arguments later and from the paper, but anyway, to more practical side of it, the same dichotomies which were there for that when we started with Cuba and Lincoln, yes? Even more of them, because I put the 2 columns onto one slide, and you can find more. What these people argue, who go for that continuum model, is that yes, it might be a totally narrative or totally numeric, but it's not a dichotomy but a continuum, because you can do something in the middle. There are some methods, there are some techniques which you can't say that it's purely narrative or purely numeric. It's kind of intrinsically somewhere in between. Maybe sometimes more to numeric side, but not clearly totally, or maybe sometimes towards the narrative. Would you actually call, somebody mentioned that you have in the survey, you might have open-ended questions in the survey. Would you call it narrative data? No? Anyway, you could call it qualitative. I would even be modest with that one. I would call it semi-structured data, even not totally open, even if you say that it's an open-ended question. But usually what it does, it's quite concrete question. It expects that people in the surveys usually don't write more than a couple of sentences or one short paragraph about in the same structure. So it's definitely it doesn't have anything to do with the narrative idea. The narrative is a story with an end, and so that this kind of in that sense any text is not a narrative. The narrative is a big text with a certain structure, certain logic in it. So that I would say that this open even though some people call this qualitative data. This qualitative is more like a quantitative tradition, qualitative label, and not the label which people would use as a qualitative in some others. So you have to understand that the same label is used in very different contexts. These qualitative and quantitative and all other big ones. So I would call it exactly something in the middle of that continuum. If you add open-ended questions to your survey, that's definitely not this end. It's rather towards the numeric, because usually what you do with it, you start to count that how many times people were having this worry or how many times the other, even though they could just open-endedly try to figure out what the problems were, or what the hobbies were, or what the places where they were had been visiting. So and all with the rest of it, you can also, so that if we were talking about this emancipatory transformative or transformative emancipatory, then the basic kind of continuum is here. Either my approach or the standpoint from where I start my research project is totally value laden, or starts with somebody's goods. So I start with my main aim is to have results which help somebody in the real life, in the real context, yeah. Or then this very traditional, the other end, that if I want to have abstract, neutral, objective results, which somebody else can also get, pure theoretical beauty, you could stretch it towards this one. But again, the real life, if you start to design certain product, you operate somewhere in the between. So you want it to be practical, you want it to do some good, but you actually want to have this certain value neutrality in it as well. So you can think in these terms with all these, And in the end of the days, if you want to be convincing, you have to talk about these things, at least about certain which are relevant for your case. But then, yeah, well, there are a couple of examples what we were talking. We hadn't, even on the techniques level, you could have a totally probability sample, which side it is, then quantitative or qualitative. If you do the true probability sampling,
Quantitative.
it's quantitative tradition. If you do the true purposive sampling, it's traditionally qualitative, but lots of quantitative research is doing purposive sampling because their question asked for purposive sample that the random sample wouldn't help. For example, my own research, PhD, was about mixed methods research. If I would have done the random sample of all the pieces of research, I would maybe have got 2 of mixed methods research studies at that point of time. But as all my questions were about mixed methods, how people go about mixed methods, I had to do a purposive sampling. I had to find these mixed methods pieces of research and then get into that. It didn't interest at that point of time. The qualitative, I knew that the qualitative and quantitative are also there, but it wasn't about my research question. It didn't interest me. So it's all about this continua in that one. And then it comes to that. David was already secretly asking me if I'm coming to that. Now I do regret that I didn't take my big colorful model on the paper for you, but you all have the computers, so you might, if you don't see it from that screen, you still see something?
Yeah.
Okay, I assume that this one can be seen. So that's the continuum model which tries to integrate all these things, like a philosophical level of the. You can find where is the layer of the philosophical level here. So that we were having the pragmatist, critical theory, postmodernism, like positivism, and there might be others. It's about any scheme that you can't. Like, if we started with 2 paradigms, positivism and constructivism, then this scheme takes a bit more of this level table, but you can find always more. If you read on philosophical, there are other traditions which are not on that scheme. Either they have not been so important at that point of time, or that in that field. My kind of view comes more from education and basic kind of mainstream social sciences, sociology, psychology, but you can find somebody can name some traditions on the philosophical level which you can find from here, which are very familiar for you, where you are used to work.
Feminism.
Sorry?
Feminism.
Feminism is not there, yeah, that's the easiest one to imagine, but where it would fit. Actually, the point is that everything will fit into that scheme because it's close to something else which is there already. Anybody?
Critical theory?
Yeah, it's like a subset of the critical theory, so that you can have what else you can have close here? Marxism. Somebody likes, somebody doesn't like, but it doesn't matter, it's there for somebody. Anything else on that level somebody would know and not find? The IT people, it's arguable, it's between of this methodological and philosophical level, but my IT colleagues have asked me that where is the, what do you think, systems theory? Anybody have ever kind of read or worked with systems theory as a background framework? Not so much of a philosophy. It fits quite well here to that corner again. If you start to kind of rationalize what's similar and what's not, so that the basic idea is that there are a lot of traditions which you actually in original sense can't call paradigms because there are big overlaps. You just have them, and there are lots of common between one or these, and not even here close, but here you can't see the colors. Maybe if you take it, you can. This is kind of pink, and this is kind of pink on that original scheme. That connects that actually this phenomenology and critical theory have a lot of common as well. And even if you think about this positivism and postmodernism, which seem to be here the most kind of far away places, the world actually turns around from the other side, and both they come to idealism in their extremes, so that there is a kind of idealistic ideas behind, so that, well, and you could imagine that philosophical layer as up there, and then down there is what you find from...
the background layer is not so visible, so it's...
This is the one, the methods or techniques layer, yeah? So that in this two-dimensional scheme, it's like squeezed together, but you could squeeze it up. Then you can imagine, like visually, that these philosophical schools of thought are up there. They influence the ways how we actually build up our studies, how we build up the design of the study, what kind of techniques or methods do we consider as a proper or good ways to use for collecting data and analyzing data. But it's not one-to-one, like one box here, one box here. It's like the influence is going this way and the other way as well. The same technique can be used in very different frameworks and contexts. But how, actually, if you know that the context or framework has been different, even if on technical level you have used the same data collection, kind of same data collection technique, how do you interpret this data is totally different. So in that sense, if you do more serious piece of research, you can't skip the general level. If you only operate on data collection level, so you will actually have either quite naive results or very small scale local approach. But you always want to, I would suggest you want to consider the data collection techniques within the bigger framework, at least for PhD level research. These boxes, the without the color, if you can separate these up there, this one. Can you find the common label for this?
What?
Neighboring fields. If we think about the social research, if the main scheme is about how to go about the social science research or these kind of things, or at least the partly social scientific research, so which I consider human-computer interaction research is basically. So we do borrow statistical methods are developed, as I pointed out. You could be the one who brings it in. The arts, the people do the arts, researchers look into that field and borrow and use the new techniques or old techniques from the other field, integrated. Indeed, at some point all social science tried to be exactly the same methods like natural sciences, not today anymore. And now we more and more borrow, especially with these IT-related fields, we more and more borrow the techniques from technical sciences into our repertoire of techniques and methods.
I can't read the visualization trying to make with colors.
Yeah, that's I usually what I do is that I keep it on the paper as well. But if you open it, the colors I try to explain the colors are just that if they are similar, that means that there is an overlap as well. They seem to be very far away from each other. These two, don't they? Yes, quite phenomenology and but as I have if you can later open it up in the computer, it's in the web as well. With you can see Actually, the easiest is to open it from here. If you want to do it right now, those who have the computer, so the address is here. Can you read it? Not too long anyway, so you can open it up and be sure that it's there for you, even if not on the paper, so you can zoom it in your screen. And the color should be there. On the screen there are no pale colors left, but you can. Anyway, as for this short course, it's not possible to get into all of the details of this scheme. It's just what I can suggest is if you have got the basic idea what it is about, if you get interested, there is the full paper which is already delivered for you to you, so you can get back to these details. Otherwise, we can spend all the two days on that scheme and the background of that scheme. Fine. Just to add, the little ones which text here in the boxes, which you can't read at all from the screen now, but just to comment that these are the more of this strategy level. Like, for example, here is the design research approach. You were talking about experimental research. Tell me, without seeing where it should locate in that scheme, that framework. You use this framework and tell me from where mostly the experimental research locates with the logic and the understanding how to go about the world and the research.
The one left?
I would say here, upper left, not that much here, but traditionally here, yeah, the survey would be a bit like here, but still like combining these open-ended questions and having more of this post-positivistic, if you like, or even the phenomenological or constructivist ideas could be on the background for surveys as well. Ethnography was also talked. Where do you locate the ethnography?
Upper right one?
Yeah, quite here, isn't it? So because of these woods coming here, methods more qualitative. Indeed, it's all abstractive, not the millimeter or centimeter. You understand, every scheme is it just gives a logical frame. Anything else on the strategy level? Case studies?
I would say upper middle.
I would say everywhere. That's the tricky one. I have hooked you, because actually, yeah, you can have a case studies which are on technical level totally quantitative from the beginning to the end. Not so often, but still they are there. Then you can have a case studies of almost like a piece of art, like a kind of autobiographic approaches, and then you can find everything in the middle, so you can draw the box. So be careful when you talk about the case study and use the label of case study again. So some approaches, some labels are just so stretched on this logic, in what frameworks, in what kind of technical detail they are used. But most commonly, anybody knows action research as a strategy? Where do you locate that one?
Somewhere at the right.
I would locate it somewhere here.
I say.
Okay, yeah,
upper
it could be
north.
quite purely qualitative, depending from the
South.
here. So that anyway, close to this emancipation,
Exactly.
empowerment, reflection. Actually, the most important layer of that scheme is this one. For me, these keywords here. Do you have the common label for them? What they stand for? All of them. There is one common logic behind why I have chosen these keywords to that layer, the middle layer, the philosophical, theoretical layer, technical, methodological layer, and then in the middle is this layer with these keywords. Mm-hmm. I was even mentioning the common earlier. If I was talking about the emancipation and empowerment, I was calling them as a principal aims of the research, or the most general aims, isn't it? In this framework, the biggest aim or the prime priority for research is to find out about the laws, how the world works, and then we know. Okay, here this suggests that we have a problem in real life. We can't solve it just as as an expert sitting down. I have my background knowledge, I can solve it. It's more complicated problem, so it needs a research. It needs some data to work on, to analyze, and to go, and then I can solve the real life problem. So here we are already kidding that there is a certain kind of inequality or injustice I see in the world. So I want to contribute somehow to either to at least point it out so that more people would see that injustice and start to understand from where it comes from. So I do some research to have an evidence that it's not just my biased kind of view on world, but you see there is a wealth of evidence. You should also agree that this is the problem and we have to do something about it. So it's a close with the problem solving. In the end of the day, we want to advance somehow. Here it's a tricky word again. Because meaning, if you do research, do you want to have it some meaning? Always. Around the scheme, probably. You wouldn't do any piece of research if you wouldn't like to. But anybody who has worked closer in this tradition, what kind of meanings or in what context the meanings come the priority for research?
The things that have meaning for the people we are investigating.
So the research doesn't have to be about the objective reality. That comes with the idea that all that matters, or mostly what matters, is how people make sense of the world, how they create meaning for their real life experiences, how they, and it can be personal, it can be shared meanings. And we as a researchers want to understand and want to study how these meanings are created or co-created, and how they change in the context, where the context change, how they clash maybe, because in the same reality there are different people with different groups, with different backgrounds, different understandings, how people make out different meanings from the same reality, and to understand. So that's becomes the most important kind of aim for the research in that tradition, and so on. The other tricky word, theory. Is any serious research theory-free if it's a scientific research? I wouldn't go for it. It can be a research, and that's the journalists do research, the police does research, some survey companies do research, but it's not scientific. If we talk about scientific research, it's always somehow the theory comes in. But again, why it's there as a basic make first. Anybody? Usually in traditional sense, what comes first? The theory is there somehow, isn't it? And then with empirical research, we follow from the theory and either confirm it or disprove it. But in that context, anybody works with that somewhere in the pillar? So that there is like again, the more local look than there. Here we believe, or these people who truly work in this tradition, they believe that the world works with big there are big regularities, at least if not the laws. But here in this context, that there's this social constructivism, that the reality is constructed locally, and therefore we should build up our local theories. We should first look at the empirical data, what's going on there, and then kind of emerge or filter out the theory about this more or less local, but the local might be coming in some cases quite big geographically, if you like, but at least it's the other way around, so that start with empirical data, and from the empirical data construct or build up the theoretical world. So this is one. If I was emphasizing in the beginning that the most important for me when you start to argue that why did I use these or these methods or techniques or methodologies, though go and ask yourself if I'm clear about my aims for the research, and that's the most abstract level. That what's the biggest kind of in most abstract way, what I want to, what do I believe in, and then it might be helpful to, even if you haven't read too much about these philosophical schools, if you feel yourself at home at some of these more than the others, you can go and read more about these background ideas, which you can find there. So in an idealistic world, it's indeed, you could think that I learn all of the philosophy of the world. You can imagine yourself what will happen to you if you don't study philosophy but decide that I want to learn about all the philosophical schools. You will stay there and never go to do your research, because you will just stay and read about the philosophy and get depressed because there is you read one piece and then you see that there is 10 others you need to read, and you will stay. So try to focus, try to find certain pinpoint, and then to work around that pinpoint and not to try to get all that at the same time. At some point, if you get interested in methodology like I have done, indeed you have read a bit of everything in the end of the day, but don't try to start from that one. Anyway, I would leave that here. If you have this knowledge that it's there with the paper, any burning questions about this framework, how it could or should work or help you? Anyway, then let it be. If you have some questions by tomorrow, the good questions come when you sleep, so you can ask. Well,
I have one question. So you said before that you would disagree with the comment, with the first model of Huber and Lincoln, because they had these two big ones, and you, did I understand that correctly, that you say there are several where there is no line between, so they are always
yeah, there is considerably more ideas around the philosophical level and also methodological level, and there are big overlaps. There are not big gaps between, like the initial paradigmatic ideas suggest, that qualitative here, big gap, quantitative here, never could, but it's intrinsically overlapping. You can always find certain certain common traits between traditions, and even within these, I have put the dotted line here because I already mentioned that I really don't know where the post-positivism starts or ends, so it's like a bubble. But in a way, all these could be dotted lines, because if you start to read into critical theory, oh my God, you already mentioned Marxist, feminist, so there is something common, but there is certain differences, so that all of these bubbles, and even the positivism, which seems to be like everybody knows that this is the certain thing, from the naive positivism, almost idealism, towards this post-positivism, if you like, and all these variations between, I can say that you can fetch out this kind of intrinsic certain list of which should be always there to use this label, but there will be a lot of differences still. The authors from these traditions don't agree about. So in that sense, it's a multi-layer, multi-dimensional continuum where there are certain labels operate, but they are not neatly, clearly separated. Any others? Any other questions, burning questions to understand the basics of behind this thinking, line of thinking? And actually, in a real life, what you end up, okay, we will go back to that because, but basically, you might, from my point of view, it's absolutely fine to start to rationalize when you talk about your piece of research that my worldview or our worldview as a researchers is combined from the ideas from pragmatism, from phenomenology, but you have to, not just to clear it, but you have to know what you're talking about, what you take from pragmatism, what you take from phenomenology, and how do they fit together. So that's a mixed methods thinking then in the sense of that scheme. So that I'm not using slogans or schemes, just labels, but I know what's behind. I can leave certain things out of the picture, say that in my case, I don't think these go further from there is relevant but I have to have this set of the heart, so-called, how does it, and understanding how does it work for me for that particular. And the other thing actually, do you have to be born and then realize, yes, I'm that point of person, or then the other somebody else has been born and then he's always here or her. Definitely not. The one thing is that the ideas themselves develop. New traditions come on. You as a person read more, think more about how the world works, so that people have made, they said, I was like a bit older people than me, they have played this game. Yeah, in 60s, we were all believing that we were living here and had to do this. Then we went here, and came back here somehow with the ideas or the understanding about the world. So in that sense, in that continuum idea, the person, the researcher, the human being is allowed to have a mental model which is changing and developing all through the life. But at every certain point I have to have a kind of heart for my understanding. I have to have it fixed somewhere for myself. If I'm saying that I'm continuously floating, not understanding really where I am, then you probably won't be very convincing in the research area. So you have to anchor yourself in certain position for a certain time, and then move on. If you are not satisfied with that point. But it's also fine to set anchored and say that 20 years I'm comfortable, I'm working in the same spot, I feel that it works for me, I believe into it, that's my way of settling my understanding, and you just do your research in the same framework. Hopefully still having at least a glimpse what the others do outside your box. But on the other hand, not so much in social sciences, but actually the other sciences seem to move pretty much the other way. If you think about chemistry, the top chemists, actually they quite proudly say that they even don't understand the papers, which were a bit different branch of chemistry. They read the paper and they might say that I don't understand any of it, because to be on top, you have to know that much in that narrow, starting from basics. And maybe they know about the application fields today. They have this interdisciplinarity. But to be a top chemist today, it might very well be that in the other kind of new branches of chemistry, they even don't know the terminology. So it is always a choice, and the glimpse. How can I locate myself in the research field? So in social sciences, the better to have that at least this. I think at least to know that this exists. But indeed, don't try to understand all the details of all the possible traditions, then you will get lost very soon. Okay. Well, at least I was suggesting you can go home and think if you like the idea of paradigms in original sense, in that sense that and you can go on with that idea that the mixed methods is the third paradigm. Your choice indeed, but for myself I have a good arguments not to work in that. But it makes life easier for the beginners, I'm pretty sure, to think and to take from textbooks that this is our paradigm. So you might want to start with referring to these authors and say that I'm developing later my ideas when I have the first feeling I have time, because I did my first 2 pieces of research truly trying to do the experimental research, and only by doing it I felt that it's not like flexible frame enough to answer these questions I wanted to answer. So that gave me the kind of kick to look around. Is there something else? Could you do something better, or could you do something more than just traditional or differently? So it's fine to start with it's better. It's even could be if you're a beginner, try out some textbooks things and get your personal experience, why it's too narrow, why it doesn't exactly satisfy your needs. And indeed, we were already talking about this terminology. Don't get lost, or if you don't feel confident, don't use the heavy terminology. But you can always study into it and be sure. But we have already a collection of these dangerous terms. Will you reflect it back to me? Which I have warned you about, the use of starting with the same paradigm, whatever it means for different people, might be from the very different. So that case study was the other one. What else was there? The qualitative and quantitative themselves are quite questionable, actually, to label. Then one piece, we're coming to that one, related to mixed methods very especially, is actually, have you heard about triangulation? Yes. Indeed, that's the most dangerous word to just to play with if you haven't read into background. But the most common, the problem is not about indeed using the terms, but what the problem happens when you have just got the idea, you think you have got the idea what it means from this common, like what you read and how people talk. Then you find certain serious authors who have referred first, or from the textbooks you take the Kuban, Lincoln or Tenzin first used the triangulation word, and you refer to Tenzin, not having read about the Tenzin, what Tenzin said 30 years ago about triangulation. And then you have the problem in your paper, because the Tenzin was thinking something totally different by the triangulation as you have understood it today. And then it comes a problem. The same about the paradigm.
It's also about the method as such, right? Because grounded theory was by Glaser and Strauss and Corbin wrote another book, and Glaser didn't agree on that and wrote another book, and then there's
It's quite common. So that's my message. That be careful, even though the same labels they might mean very different things to different authors. And the other way around as well, we saw this, which was the example the other way around, was this table. These people were talking almost about the same thing, and they had thousands of different labels. So you might very easily find that I'm talking about design research model, and you read from somebody else's tradition and think that it's quite similar what she was talking, but they have totally different, they have a label of developmental research for the same thing. And it is true. they are quite similar. It's just that people from different traditions. The world has only now opened up, you know, so that everybody could read. But human being, you can't read all the different traditions anyway. So people come up with similar ideas from different traditions, label it differently, and you end up having the similar models with having a quite different labels. Well, where are we then? Do we need a short break or can we go on for another hour? Fine with you? Okay. Well, I would then, as time is flying, and the rest, the middle part now from what I have here now about this quality, and this one, this is the summary scheme. But this is covered by the other paper of me, so that as we have not too much time, and I want to get to the mixed methods now, as otherwise the time is, so that I will skip now the big part of the slides, but you can, again, it's the background framework. The main message is the quality matters, and especially with the mixed methods. If it looks for the other paper that you have mixed it up and mixed and matched whatever takes, you will not be convincing. So that the more you put the creativity in, the more you have to be logical and analytic and giving reasons for your choices so that the people wouldn't get lost, you know. The more complicated your research design is, the more easy it is that the reader is getting lost in the first 2 pages and loses it all. And indeed, even if it's a very good piece of research, she or he is not in a position to actually, so that the kind of basic logic you probably have to see. And there are others, the other ideas. You can just have we have been talking about certain things from here, but you can browse if you are interested the slides and also the paper. But just a couple of the ones. So quick one. If you have the ones you have been talking about the ethnography, does it fit like it is in here? If you think in this, what I was saying, that always think about what was the main purpose and then what was the more finer purpose. For example, start with the purposes. Was it the picture you got? What the ethnography best helps? What kind of issues? Or did you get some other idea?
I'm not sure if it has to be a culture nowadays, if we use ethnographical methods in HCI.
Yeah. How do you another word? How do you define the culture for yourself? Cinema, theater, kino, or culture like family culture, work culture? That's definitely what it meant. What it was meant here. So not like a culture in that narrow sense where every day that we are going to have a concert, and that's the part of the culture. But this is in this wider sense. But anyway, let it be here. Let me see. This is common, or it's already familiar to us, but for the IT people, I can't help. I have to introduce the other model as well. The more, so that if I'm talking about the traditional empirical research, and then there could be theoretical research, but that's the tricky one. Let's not get into that one. I'm the one who is thinking, I have already mentioned the design research approach as separate from the traditional empirical research. So if the empirical research, you have to do these, and there was also the theory level, then is this model familiar to you? Or the idea of design research as such? don't think your program here had the design research as a method on it, so that. But it's becoming more and more popular in this human-computer interaction, especially as the need to design new environments, to actually maybe even to create new needs. If we take the market, if we take the business to lead the research and not so much the science, but also so the cycle means that to do a piece of design or developing something new or redeveloping something which doesn't work anymore in a given context, the new context, so that you start with analyzing the situation or the problem, then you do all this design thing, most important. If you do it as a research, then you give reasons, probably which come from that analysis. Why do I choose these and these solutions? Then monitor, describe the results, and then evaluate. It doesn't have to be the linear one indeed. And the cycle means that you do it several times and you can deconstruct it to the big piece of design result into smaller ones. You can design or develop the smaller pieces and then put them together into different. And indeed, if you want to do it in the research context, you probably, and on the PhD level, you want to get some generalizable ideas, not just that this piece now works well in the reality, but I have learned, I have some more new theoretical knowledge. So that this is the design research, but within this one, why I'm showing it here is that it's perfectly fine to think about applying mixed methods approach within this model as well, or even the other way. This model specially calls for a mixed methods approach, even though maybe traditionally some authors on mixed methods research, first of all, doesn't know about anything about that model, or they don't work with it, or then they wouldn't agree that applying it in a way. But first of all, in this model, do you need to collect empirical data? If you apply this kind of model for your research and the aims to develop something, probably where or what steps? Here, do you need?
No.
More the sketches, alternatives, evaluation.
Analysis of the problem. I would say that if you want to do it, indeed you can start here with the sketches. Then I would say that you have skipped this step, at least in the first cycle. You started with the sketches, you started with this step, you started to design, then you come to that one, what it does. Then you apply somehow or try to test it. Maybe in the first cycle it's experts who evaluate, not the users. But here at least you start to collect the empirical data, yes? But I would come back here. If you do it as a serious piece of research, you probably won't want to start from right away to design, but you want to learn more about this background. And then you might very, very well use the survey or the observational data collected, how they actually, there is something already which is almost good, but not good enough. So you observe what's the problems, or you ask the people. So actually in this cycle, you might need to collect or want to collect different empirical data on that stage. You collect actually at least the metadata here as well, if you do it as a proper research. So you monitor your design process, and that gives you another type of empirical data. Then you collect empirical data here, and then you do 3 cycles of it. So how many pieces, how many kind of sets of empirical data did you get then? Serious? 3 times 3. 9, yeah, because if you did it once, there might be a quite simple design issue. You did it once and you got it right. You just sit down, analyze a bit of a problem, took a team of experts who learned a bit of this analysis, then you designed it, applied, and learned that everything is fine, working, goes. But if it's really difficult problem, probably you don't get it right with the one cycle. So you test the initial ideas, you learn again, you go back, you redesign or develop further, and then you get into, so that in the end of the days, you might have 10 years of your project. We just had a PhD defended 10 years of project of design research project. Some of the people might have argued that if it's so extensive and if the analysis have got the authors to redevelop the ideas so that they have rejected the initial ideas, then it could have got out of the final report. But anyway, so you could think of collecting quantitative and qualitative data here. You could think of collecting quantitative and qualitative, and so within this big framework, it's also mixed methods, because for some needs you collect structured information, for some needs. So in that sense, I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't skip this scheme, at least to give you maybe it helps you to have these kind of projects also kind of in a more of in the scheme and in the vein of mixed methods thinking. Well, towards more, that was all the background, but still biased towards the mixed methods way of thinking background, but it more or less as I could think of doing a piece of qualitative or quantitative design, these things all would be still back on the background. But now, purposes, if we talk about we were talking about the purposes for research as general. Now, from there on, we are talking about purposes for mixing quantitative and qualitative aspects within one. So can you focus? That there are purposes for doing big purposes, why you do your research whatsoever, and then if you have decided to combine quantitative and qualitative aspects within your project, then you ask what are the purposes concretely for combining quantitative and qualitative aspects. And then the typologies, I mentioned that there is an endless list actually, or you could think of these mixed methods designs, but indeed there are typologies people have. And not only the one typology, but we will just have a quick look on those, because not all of them, in my view, are very helpful. But at least to start with some, maybe it's gives a better framework than just to say that everything is on continuum and decide yourself whatever you want to do. So maybe some typologies. So could you now think, just what could be the purpose for combining, the aim or purpose for combining? Why do you want to combine qualitative and quantitative? What it gives to you? Any reasons you could come up with?
For me, to test the quality and also the feasibility of the system in the same test, same user study.
Okay, and which one the qualitative serves better, and which one the quantitative serves better? Well, okay, we have to, so that you see I'm pushing you now to think that if you give these mixing reasons, you have to have the idea that this part is better done by quantitative and this part of my thing is better done by qualitative, and there could be even more, so that the big question is, how do I integrate these two? Indeed, in idealistic world, what you would think, if somebody asks them, what is the good mixed method study, indeed, the idealists idealist people, well, the more integrated the quantitative and qualitative are, the better. I wouldn't say that always it's that way, because it depends on the purpose exactly. What's the purposes for research, what's the purposes for mixing, and sometimes you don't want to integrate at all. You want to do them quite separately. We are going to these issues now, that when you want to do them quite separately, when you want to have them as possibly integrated as you can, the mixed mixing of the. But first of all, okay, that was already there. These warnings. Don't worry. Even if you get lost here, with now the new terminology only starts to come. The terminology of mixed methods, you know. And if you get a bit puzzled for the first time, don't worry. You can have a lot of materials to go back and make sure that you understand before you use them. But anyway, the why question is but before the why, now the definitions are coming. I'm not going to read. I'm giving a bit of a time for you to read, and then we just discuss these different definitions quickly. 4 reading already, fine. Anything new to add what we have been having already today? Qual and quan is there, pretty much. And these are familiar as well, yes, the list of these aspects, so that it practically says that on whatever level you could, if you combine qualitative and quantitative, then you can use pretty much that kind of definition which we have had already forming the picture. Or any questions about that? Or quite clear? And I would say the and or is important, because this one, another definition. Almost. I would agree that it's quite kind of not so easy to see the difference, but the emphasis, this one starts from what? That's actually the most common understanding. This one starts with collects data from different. And indeed, if you once have the qualitative set of data and quantitative set of data, then you want to analyze them both and probably integrate. But this is the most typical, that to actually justify the label of mixed methods, you have to have at least 2 data sets from which one is the quantitative and the other one is the qualitative. And indeed, you go on and analyze and do the inferences and then try to integrate. But if you read this one, this says and or. It actually doesn't emphasize that you always have to have 2 data sets in a mixed methods research. It says that you might have, for example, the research on the strategy level, the qualitative and quantitative, or even it says that you could have a qualitative strategy, like for example, a case study, which is traditionally qualitative, but you collect quantitative data. So that this kind of thing would be more like a mixed model studies if you don't have 2 data sets, quantitative and qualitative. But that's the most common one, that people think in frames that you might have 3 data sets also, yeah. But this one, compared to the previous ones, your comments compared to to the previous ones? Does it bring something new? Does it emphasize something a bit differently?
It's also on a higher level because it emphasizes it can also be a philosophical assumption, not just on a
If
data
you
level.
look at that one, nothing about the theoretical, philosophical background, quite technical level thing, yes. I collect data, I set my research. This one had also, but it doesn't take anyway this kind of, this one, the first and the bigger part takes these philosophical framework issues into it, so that the pushes you to have this, that you actually think about this framework. What is, if it's pragmatism or if it's something mixed mental model on the background, but at least you have to be clear about that, not just to go about collecting data and thinking in very technical levels. As soon as I have open-ended or open interviews so then it's a good piece of mixed methods research. But on technical level, it's still so you can't escape. It can't be only on the philosophical level. On the technical level, methods level, you have to still. You collect data. It emphasizes that you collect different data, quantitative and qualitative data, and go on. And the last one. I mean, on the field there are more, but that's my collection is ending here. You just another piece of exercise.
I was thinking about, I like this notion of learning one from another, because from what I always thought about this mixing, both methods, that you have one that informs then probably the next one. So you have a qualitative method, probably you learn something about the situation, and then you can use that to inform the design of a quantitative study for questionnaires or something like that. So this learning, yeah, I like that.
Well, anyway, can you guess, if you take back, I can scroll back to that basic model. Can you actually, if I push you to think in terms of this one, the last one, could you locate the author by the worldview? If I give as the last one was, can I come from this worldview position with this kind of conceptualization? Probably not. Quite clearly from here, isn't it? So that the most important thing is to understand that people are understanding the same reality differently, they have different understandings, and they must somehow come together, not to get like it happens that we stay with our empowered position and somebody is staying there with either taking our position or not taking, but not having anything to say. So that you can very clearly see that these people who had this very technical, quite like this more like these kind of backgrounds, because this technocratic or technically oriented, the other ones, and then in the middle. So so you can see depending from what actually is the person's worldview influences also the understanding what the mixed methods is good for or should be good for, and how should we conceptualize to where we should put the emphasis. So they say that indeed you might collect both quantitative and qualitative data, but that's like a secondary or a tertiary issue in all what it comes from, compared to these authors who say that you have to have always two data sets, otherwise you couldn't use the mixed methods label to that piece of, you could do that, but research where you don't have, but it's just about the labeling or thinking in frames. Any questions about this? Now you have seen what the mixed methods truly is. You can choose your way depending on what level you are working and what kind of worldview you feel more at home with, and try to implement then this kind of. They are all as valid. All are very respected authors from the field. So that all are famous authors. I have the definitions from. None of them is like. Sometimes I have these examples that let's discuss. It's not good practice, but these definitions were all the valid, all good ways of looking. Let me. Probably. What was here? Now the questions are that if I start to think, then I have my research aim, at least the value, not very clear. Start in these terms, which we were already thinking. Whether I want to improve the society part of it in more general, then I focus what in it. Indeed, I might have these ones. This is tricky one. But these are true reasons, they're real ones, especially if I'm doing, I might actually start to think that I want to become a good researcher. At some point I have to try out the mixed methods project. So I start with the first thing is that I want to do the mixed methods research. Indeed, but then you go on back and forth and think what is the substantial question indeed I want to answer, and then you decide if you write it up from where it really started or doesn't. But anyway, if you have chosen that I want to talk about not only the relationships but the causal relationships, the influences. What would be the first choice of the framework, methodological strategy? I want to know if this influences, if this model helps me to better, or these people better to learn, or better to cope, or better to understand. Give me the strategy you would have as a first choice. Hint is that you have been learning about it in this course earlier. Okay, this one helps you. Will you find it from here? The first one, isn't it? I want to see if it influences, if it affects in a positive way, indeed, always in social science research. We don't set up the reason to see that if it's a bit differently. If we want to prove that smoking is bad to your health, though we don't do the experiment and say that you smoke and we will prove after 10 years that it is bad to your health, but we can do it much more clever way. But so my suggestion is that don't start with right away thinking that I want to use mixed methods, even if it's intrinsically your motivation that you want to try it out. But try to start to think, if my question is that type, what would be the first choice of the strategy? Either it's a survey, either it's experimental design, either it's ethnography, or so on, or the design research, which I was just proposing, or action research we have already. And there are more case studies. This could be continued, this table. Any other strategies you have, you could know. Okay, let's not make it too complicated. Let's stay with this case study, then it's enough for the beginning anyway. Even though there are more. Anybody have heard of phenomenographic research, for example? And you can go on. if you have chosen the first one, then you could go on with this kind of thinking. I choose the experiment as my main kind of logic for my because I wanted to see if there are some effects, if there are influences, if my new model of teaching or new model of providing some information in the web is influencing the ways people learn or understand. And then you start to think that because you have learned that mixed methods can enhance and help to have even better, so you start that maybe maybe I know already the common weaknesses of this experimental design or the survey design. And then I have now learned I asked that have other people somehow already mixed within the experimental research? Have some other people already mixed qualitative aspects into survey? Or if I choose the ethnography, have some other people used effectively the quantitative ways to enrich? That's what you learn when you go into these mixed methods, that yes, they have, and you can have from different books the examples how people have actually done it, so you don't have to invent the wheel, at least in the beginning, so that there are common purposes already on the field, and then indeed go always to your pragmatic side of if I actually have resources, time, not always money, time, skills, people to do it all, because or can I have enough time to learn? If I'm coming from quantitative, as I'm coming and want to integrate some qualitative, I have to ask if I know already or if I have time to learn how to, or what's the other alternative in real life nowadays, the research, not the PhD project so much, but in real life research, can I make up a team? Actually bring in the people. If I'm good at quantitative part, but I'm open-minded and can understand that the qualitative can bring in some new, better ways, can I kind of take some qualitative people on board who think the same ways and we can collect? So in PhD level, indeed, you want to try to do it all yourself, but then you have 4 years to learn a bit more about methodology, and if you're already chosen for the PhD studies, I'm absolutely sure you are able to learn it well enough so that you can do something. But the biggest problem is, you probably know that as a supervisor, you always have to cut down the people want to change all of the world. You just try to get them to change a little part of the world. Usually so. Another piece of because we have been so that a little thinking exercise again to keep you awake. Otherwise, if I'm overloading with new terminology. So the questions are there. This is taken from the real life. Just some bits out which were not relevant or which I wanted to make abstract. So let's work with that one. On the basis what I have already told you today, what you guess my answer would be. If somebody writes up, the overall objective of our study was investigate whatever it was, using both quantitative and qualitative methods.
You could interpret it that it's an objective to use both methods, but it's like the objective should be what is left out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because that might have been this, that intrinsically my person is that I started from that because I wanted to do the mixed methods piece, and therefore, but this for me is definitely not the purpose for the study as such. this comes later in the next sentences, because I want to study this complicated question, what's left out in purpose from here, because it might be whatever, then therefore to answer this part of this big question, the qualitative aspects or qualitative ways of doing it work better, and for the other side of this big problem or question, the quantitative help me better, and therefore it's reasonable, not that I desire to use exactly the mixed methods, but my substantial issue, what I want to study, asks me for combining these, so that I would go for that one. So, but you can find these. It's not only about mixed methods, it's exactly the same about if only one. People very often say, I want to study this qualitatively. I always am critical about that. Because if you don't have the reasons why exactly qualitatively, then it doesn't cost anything, this kind of. Second one.
It doesn't fit with all definitions.
Yeah, we saw a set of the definitions, so that be careful here. It's easier, I'm absolutely sure, it's easier to start with thinking that two data sets, I can feel it, touch it, so I define it for that. But be sure that you at least know that not all of the people in the field box the mixed methods with one as such, as narrow as that. This one. So this one assumes that if you do a mixed method study, you have to have qualitative questions, quantitative questions, and then you have to have these strange mixed methods questions to the results. I'm not suggesting that this is it. This is awfully important question always in a mixed methods research. But is it the research question, or should it be? It's a kind of technical level question which helps you to show the quality, or if your evidence is valid or not, but not so much of a research question as such. So, but again, different authors have a different expectations and views, so you can think about these things. Then, closer to this why, then we choose to combine. And I have certain early things. The triangulation comes. Anybody then knows the Tenzin's early understanding. By the way, the triangulation by Tenzin at that time was about the qualitative research, not the mixed methods. But anyway, mixed methods tradition after that took it over from qualitative research in the same logic. Anybody knows the early definition of the triangulation? Here it is. As it Tenzins, I'm not. So the purpose for bringing in several data sets or several researchers actually by Tenzin, data source investigator is a researcher, or method of the analysis, so that comes with this idea that any ways of collecting data brings in some kind of biases. If I get two data sets, analyze them, and get the same results, then I'm more sure that this is the truth.
But isn't it also possible that it amplifies the bias?
Absolutely. That's the main critique about this initial idea, that if you happen to choose the methods with the same bias, then you are more sure about the wrong results, basically. And on the other hand, if you take it into the mixed methods context, then if you really bring in the quantitative structured data collection and the open, let's say a narrative, truly narrative, open-ended, not just open-ended, but the narrative approach, do you really can actually answer the same questions, truly exactly the same questions? Do you believe it? So it is a very problematic, but it is, therefore this triangulation thing is a bit of, today very many people use the triangulation as a synonym for mixed methods. As soon as they bring together something qualitative and quantitative, or too qualitative, they call it triangulation. I did 2 things together or 3 things together, it's triangulation. But if you refer to Tenzin, it's definitely not what Tenzin meant by it. Actually, if you truly want to do this as a triangulation, can you integrate quantitative and qualitative, or these 2 approaches which you do, if you want to validate one set of results with the other ones? Absolutely not. And if you integrate there before you get the results, it's already not good for validation, because it's like tingled and tangled back and forth. If you truly want to do the validate, you have to keep it closed. So one data set, analyze it totally independently, the other one totally. And if you are the one researcher who do the same, it's already the question of if you can, if the same researcher can actually independently analyze the one and the other. Do you believe? I can't. So in that sense, I should, in my worldview, you should be very careful about this initial idea of triangulation, if and in what conditions it can be actually applied. You could, in my worldview, you should go then for different researchers, because and keep them separate, that they can change their ideas or whatever. So that too. But it's there, and you can see that originally there was this data triangulation or investigator, or even the theory triangulation. So you look at the same problem from different theoretical frameworks and see how you work it out. If you get the same results or not, but I will leave you here to think that what your worldview says, and how you now next time when you read that somebody is saying, or hear that somebody is saying that they did triangulation, then you look and hear. Listen carefully what they actually mean, if they mean it like Tenzin did, or if they have modified it to something totally different. Any questions about this triangulation thing? It still can be done. I don't say that it can't be done, but it's very carefully thought through thing. It's not like I'm mixing, just having 2 data sets and it's triangulation in that sense.
Shouldn't you then, if you really want to do triangulation, be aware about the weaknesses of the method you use in the first place, and then choose the second one to compensate the...
Yeah, and then you have to ask yourself that if I do these 2 quite different methods, if I really can ask the same question or answer, and think. If you do believe that you can go forward, if you actually don't, then you can't do it. Under that label, at least. There are other labels and other purposes to do it then. Okay.
Yes. What do they do if they have 2 different results?
2 different?
2 different results.
Results.
2 different results.
Yeah.
So you have two methods and 2 different results.
If you learn a bit more, you can go.
Who do you blame?
I will skip a
Do you
bit
blame the
from
data?
here.
Methods?
Let's go for here. I will answer it from here. There are different ways indeed. If you truly did believe into that validation model and that it should work for you, you might end up saying that I need further research because there must be some methodological issue then if the results doesn't converge. But I do believe that then I have 2 big biases. The one way to think is that I have 2 big methodological biases, either one or the other or both ways, that I can't be sure about my results. Well, that's the one thing to think. If the other way to think is that, to go back to that what we just discussed, that if I actually did these two things, if I start to think, these two data sets, it's easiest, these two data sets, if I collected one like this and the other like this, the open-ended and can I really answer exactly the same questions? Maybe I just got about the same big phenomena, but one aspect and the other aspect, and it might be, or then I might have got somebody's point of view and somebody else's point of view about the same reality. Or then I might even think in other methods that who was the person or how was the data collected, because if I think in this postmodern or constructivist, that the respondents, do they tell me the truth or do they construct their story which they tell me actually? And if I was collecting this story in this context and the others, maybe they changed it because of the context, so that there are many others. But if you do, I would. My world is not black and white, definitely. So I would think that what my suggestion would be, well, I would go for that. Change my idea that even if I naively started with the idea that this will be the converging, that the triangulation should be there, having thought through all these, I might think that, oh, I got something so new that given my background knowledge, given these existing frameworks, theoretical frameworks, I even couldn't think that there is something this kind of, so that this initiation comes in, that I have kind of discovered some kind of paradoxes or unforeseen results, so that the traditional way in research is that before you actually start to collect the empirical data, you have to have your hypothesis, so you have to know what you get. But that's boring, at least for me. So I'm not so fond of doing this kind of research, actually, where I already know it, and if I don't get it. So it's much more appealing to work on the borderlines of that one. If I'm very proud, I'm setting from the beginning the aim of, I'm combining, in that context, I'm combining qualitative and quantitative methods because I sense that there might be something. Everybody's thinking and that women and men are taking these issues differently. The simplest stupid example, but still. But I think that if these contexts are deconstructed, we will see that there is no actually the gender difference, so that it comes from certain different ages. And I'm trying to bring in the qualitative data set and quantitative data set to exactly to disprove certain common understandings or these kind of things, so that what everybody is taking as a true thing, or everybody is believing in, or so that I'm kind. So it takes a bit of experience. It takes a bit of being brave and curious. But that I believe that gives the most innovative results if you are once doing it convincingly. Indeed, the hook is that if you are a newcomer, if you're not very self-confident, talking with a loud voice and saying, yeah, that's my case, and you all have to believe that I have discovered something new, then they just can say that go back home and do it properly as textbook says, and that's it. But
this balance gives a little bit more credibility to your research too, because then you are validating also someone else's approach, and it's like for perspective.
Absolutely, it's always about the choices and where I feel comfortable and where I feel that I have enough evidence, and where analytic basis to convince the reader or the listener. So that, but these two, okay, we have done with these ones. The three left, and actually this is the list which I think that when I look around and ask myself that why people have combined qualitative and quantitative, this 5 is quite enough. Always one or the other of these is on the background, and sometimes indeed in the one set of study I could have the both or 2 or 3 reasons to combine qualitative and quantitative. Let's start from here. Development with a little bit of. Can you bring into your mind some example? So you want to do a proper survey. How do you go about it? A good survey to see the attitudes of the population. So you might borrow from theory, you might sit down and think that I'm the best expert to have the survey questions and the categories there. But you might think that, oh, these, where I can do this one, are boring issues because everybody has studied it. Why should I do the same if I have it all there taken? Or then I could think that just sitting down and thinking without borrowing anywhere, it's probably will be quite naive. So what I want to do is to look at some unstudied issues, and then I decide that actually I can't do the good survey instrument without exploring the issue first. So I want to, because my main aim is still to get the good survey instrument in the end of the day, but I did decide that I can't do the good survey instrument before without going to the field and collecting certain amount of qualitative open issue. Either I do observations, either I do the open-ended interviews, either I do I wouldn't say the ethnography as such, but ethnographic interviews I could say, for example, or a little amount of ethnographic observations, and then I'm getting better understanding how these people actually in the field understand these concepts and issues, and then I'm in a much better, then I'm combining the theoretical understanding, the empirical understanding, and my own logic and analytical mind indeed into one set, and then I'm getting the good survey instrument. Yeah, one example of the development model. So it can be the other way around. I want to do the case studies, a set of case studies to understand deeply certain issues. What problem do I have?
Pick one.
How can I pick the best informants? How can I either them be the companies or the persons? So, but I might do the survey first, just the background survey, to ask certain what are the relevant issues. I have a list of 1,000, and then I have the background information, and I see, well, yeah, my purposive sampling will be this one and this one. Indeed, I ask for the permission if they are agreed to, if I should pick them up, if they agree, and then several maybe organizations have said no. So it's always the freedom is a bit constrained, but still I can find if I do so that both ways, there are very different ways of doing. Either to the sampling issue was the enhanced in the second model, yes, that I wanted to do the good sampling and I needed some background information. I did or then clear about this development for now. Complementarity then. I'm asking quite the same questions, but not exactly. But the clarification is it asks for what? It asks for still that one is the main one. For example, the one is the main approach. The quantitative is the main approach. There are some puzzling issues I found some trends, but I can't understand why the trends are like that. So I'm going digging more qualitatively into it and trying to find the kind of explanation. I don't want to just stay on the descriptive level, say that that's it. That's the set of the attitudes on the field, that this is the better. I want to understand how they have developed, how people give reasons, so I might to collect a little bit of different. The other way around, I start with exploring what kind of understandings are there out, and I get the concept map maybe as a result of the qualitative. But then I want to end up and ask that, okay, there are 11 or 21 categories which are more common. So that I assume that I have got it all to the picture, but I have no idea yet that if one is more common than the other or how much. So I might to go for clarifying, so that this is, and the expansion, the last one, which is not so easy to separate from clarification, but still, expansion is more independent. Just the big phenomena takes these aspects, and I just add them together, and I got the more holistic picture. But it must necessarily here with the complementarity, it's clearly that I got the one set of results which is puzzling, and I'm specially collecting data to explore. But here with expansion, it's from the very beginning. I just have different aspects I need to know to have more holistic understanding. And then if to ask, we're running out of time now, but fortunately we could manage. The most important thing is I do think that this thinking is the most important, so that not to say just I want to do, but ask why do I need to do this, and then from there on it depends. Here, if it's true triangulation, no integration actually before the results are there. If I want to do the complementarity, if I analyze the data already, do I want to integrate? How do you feel? Can I do without integrating the different results then if I want to do it truly for that purpose?
If it complements, it should.
Yeah, you should integrate, otherwise it doesn't make sense. If it's for the for better understanding, you have to put them together, you have to tie them up. If you do the expansion, you might be much more loose about, I got these results, I put them side by side, and then I have a bigger picture. But still, if you want to have a good mixed methods, then you should think in terms that 1 + 1 is how much?
3.
Yes. Thank God. The best, if you ask me, when if I evaluate the mixed methods piece of research, if I read it and say that 1 + 1 is 1.5, because they had duplicated something without understanding why it should have been done, or something like they have had too much trouble, but the results are not at all that big that you could. Then I say that's a very bad piece of mixed methods. If 1 + 1 is 2, then I would say that, well, it wasn't really a mixed method study. It might be a good piece of 2 pieces of research, but anyway. But if you look at it and you get that there is something extra, if I would have just this piece and this piece without having them together, and I have got something extra, either it be 0.5 in abstract or 1, that 1 + 1 is 3, or even 4, the better it is indeed in that sense. So we have to stop, I understand, because you have to, but now it's the main question. I understand that you practically don't have time, but for tomorrow then, I can continue. Indeed, the easiest would be that I continue about these mixed methods ideas, but But maybe more rewarding would be that if you actually read some pieces of mixed methods, one article. Is it realistic that you could do it for tomorrow 9 o'clock? No?
How many pages?
I mean, the papers are, the journal papers are usually like 15 pages, but the idea to read it would be then to concentrate on methodology indeed, not to read the actual results or anything, but try to see, because the piece would be then about mixed methods and to see how and why did they mix and did it give 1 + 1 bigger than 2, or would you want to do that or not really? So if you would do it, so then we could just have discussion about it tomorrow morning, or then we can decide that we can have some 20 minutes tomorrow morning. Everybody reads it here, and then we discuss. So, Heather. Okay, think about this possibility. Tomorrow morning then I won't give you homework. I knew that it's unrealistic as you have other things, but at least be ready then as a group tomorrow at 9 to tell me if I just continue talking through my slides or if we read and discuss these papers, and take these 2 papers with you which were distributed. We will at least work a bit. They are related to this exercise, but they help us anyway tomorrow, so just keep them with you. Okay, enjoy the rest of the day. But if I combine quantitative and qualitative, the other big question comes up, what it was. Anybody? The first one was if there is a certain, the same bias, but the other way you should ask that if I choose these quite different methods, can they actually answer exactly the same question? Most commonly they can't actually, as is my point of view, so that most commonly if you do this you get not so much of a triangulation, but maybe what else then, if you combine qualitative and quantitative methods and ask quite similar questions. So yeah, the most commonly you get complementarity, so you have a partly overlapping results, but one method helps to get into one type of details and the other method helps you to get into other type of details, and then you integrate and combine these and get better understanding of the results both ways maybe, or one way. So that I would say that in the context, in the framework I'm thinking that my mental model says that triangulation can be done, but it's very carefully chosen, very narrow framework where you really can go for this original triangulation, meaning most commonly it actually seems to me if people try to do the triangulation and label it, so if I would read, I would say it's complementarity what they actually get, not the triangulation in its original meaning. But there again, the other issue with this terminology was that if you define for your study that triangulation can mean whatever kind of combination, indeed you can do that, but the problem starts when? If you use the term, refer to the original authors, but you use the term in other kind of definition or meaning, and refer to somebody who has defined it quite differently, yes? You understand? That's the main problem. Exactly with the paradigm. If you use the paradigm as just a label for any tradition, school of thought, and then you refer to Kuhn original meaning of paradigms, then you are in trouble. But if you define very carefully that I'm in that context using the term paradigm as such, fine, you can go with it. But the other way around, that's from your point of view, but if you read the paper, so never be sure that if if I'm sitting with understanding the paradigm is this thing, whatever it is then for anybody, and you read or hear somebody else is talking about paradigms, don't be sure that they mean the same thing. Be very careful about trying to get behind the label what they actually mean. Both but the triangulation and paradigm are both these kind of tricky words which you have to be very so now there are almost all of us, yes? Any other questions up from yesterday which we should try to do as a warm-up thing for today? Okay, no questions, then let's go on with without reading any papers, otherwise we will lose all the time, and but we have only 1.5 hours. I started to plot. You probably noticed already that I'm always working in schemes, and I find it very helpful, especially if you do untraditional designs. I would like you to think. So very commonly, if people start to visualize their research design, they use these kind of signs, or if they talk or if they want to visualize the quantitative part, they use this with the corners, the quadratic thing, and if they want to visualize the qualitative part, they use the more round. So that it makes quite sense, doesn't it? And then you can indeed use the arrows and everything to just to plot the design. Let's do kind of waking up exercise. Which one you like? From the traditional designs, traditional research designs. Which one you like best? I will. That's also from yesterday, the thinking line. That my suggestion was that don't start, at least in the beginning, with thinking that I want to combine 3 things from the very beginning, but start to think in the first choice of this main design and then go on. So name the traditional. What I mean, so that we would understand. When I talk about traditional research designs, name some. Any? Try, at least. Wake up.
Like a traditional lab study. A lab study.
Lab study, okay, that's not so common title for me. Is it something like a desk research or?
No, you do like experiment in the lab.
Lab. Okay, that's let's say that's for a strategy level. That's a bit too broad terminology. So that if I talk about the research strategy, that it has to have a certain logic which is always there, so that in the lab you can do very different things, and that doesn't kind of, so that another try.
But what do you exactly mean with the research design?
Yeah, well, exactly. I'm asking because I was talking yesterday, so I want you to get to line with me. So let's find the one where it was
the ethnographic
like
design.
this one helps a bit. Right hand side there are some what I would call the traditional research strategy or research design. This one where it was here, so that's this level here. So the crowded theory would be anybody knows anything about the crowded theory? Okay, but anyway, at least for this course, you have been told something about experiments, have you? You have been told about ethnography. There are 3 dots. There are plenty more, but that's what I call like this. This is the exemplary list of the traditional research designs. When the main study would be a survey study or the experimental design. if not for all these labels, I don't expect you, but at least everybody is familiar at least with some of them and gets this visualized idea. If I talk about experiments, there are very different experimental designs, but there are certain common traits always, what it means to just to use the label. What is the most, which one do you like best as a group?
Ethnography.
Ethnography you like
We
best?
learned this yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay. Everybody for going the maybe the ethnography is actually in the context of mixed methods research. It's not the easiest example to start with, but
It also like if you do ethnographic studies or already like it can be like already mixed different kind of
okay.
parts.
Let's take the ethnography as the main. Or a bit like if you use the computer, you will get the better shape. So that the main you have had your research questions, and your first choice was that the best to answer them was the ethnographic type of study. So and then you start to think in these lines. Usually ethnography is quite, which one? Quantitative or qualitative then? Quite qualitative on all these levels. This scheme is useful then. The ethnographic study. Can you tell me a couple of the words? What's always there as a strategy if we talk about ethnography? What defines a couple of things, couple of sentences?
Do you mean like what we do within the ethnography study, like observation or?
Yeah,
or
you
interview?
jumped already here. Yeah, okay, fine. So that usually data collection methods, it's easy, I know, to jump here. So that for ethnographic study, quite commonly you do the observation as a data collection and not the structured observation, but quite open. They even use the label ethnographic observation, which means that you go to. So that what else you usually do also the interviews, they're quite open-ended. These are more typical, so that on data collection level, there are certain typical methods, mostly qualitative. What about the other? The data analysis follows from there. That let's leave that one. But can you tell about some logic which is common to ethnographic studies on these two levels? What type of sampling? What logic behind the sampling for the ethnographic studies?
So it's in the field, so you don't really have a lot of control. Something you just like.
If you compare to experiments, so it's real life setting, and that's kind of this level thing. Not so much of sampling yet, but that's what I was trying to tease out. That if I talk about, if somebody tells me about ethnographic study, I would take for granted that he went or she went out to the field where the people really live. They're real, so that's one kind of the logic of behind that strategy. So something else on that level? So with that, sampling comes, so that you don't do the random sampling, do you? What type of sampling then it has to be? So it's you choose the setting. You don't choose the subjects as such, isn't it? So that you are interested. So it's most commonly purposive sample, and there is certain local interest or kind of that, so that which comes with it. Anything else with ethnographic? What kind of very commonly characteristic to ethnographic study? The time.
Usually time is a lot wider than if you do ethnographic study, it has to be longer, otherwise you're going
If you really want to use the label ethnography on strategy level, it's really a long term. Compared to, for example, you might go to the field. If you do the case study, then you go there, you very intensively try to collect all kinds of data about the past, about the present, and about maybe the ideas of the future. But with the ethnographic study, you go there and you first probably try to settle in so that you wouldn't mess up, so then you might, for the first 2 weeks, you don't use the data what you get, because you want them to get used to you, and then you live. You don't have to stay there for 2 years every day, but it's like, and that's one of the things, so that you get into that culture. We were talking yesterday that not culture like a cinema and theater, but the local culture people have created for themselves. So you want to emerge into that culture, and then there is this logic that on the one hand you want to emerge so that the local people are not bothered by you being there, but you definitely want to avoid as a researcher what? Getting native, yeah? As soon as you lose your kind of distance in abstract, then you are lost, then you are local and not the researcher anymore. So that's what I would, so that pure, quite qualitative, traditionally, the logic, long-term, and purposeful sampling, even though the position of the researcher, is it quite a neutral, objective, or proactive in ethnography? You are there in the field.
It's more like proactive.
I wouldn't say in traditional ethnography. If you, as a researcher, start to be proactive, changing the situation, bringing up the events, then you do action research.
But you cannot be really like. It's impossible if it's for a long time and you're getting like. You have to be polite.
But that's not. Yeah, that's something different. You have to emerge. You have to get common, but you let them to live their life, and then you observe, and then you are part of it, but you don't change the reality. You don't want to change in ethnography the reality. You want to observe. You want to settle it to where it was before you came in. So as soon as you take a lead, then you're lost with ethnography in traditional sense. Then you start to, but you can do it, but then it's action research logic, which you get. So that this is the main logic. But now the exercise was in our course, mixed methods course, is that I have chosen this ethnography as a main design, and then now I start to think that how could I, how could I strengthen the qualitative design with some quantitative aspects, so that to get this mixed methods idea into the field. So you already mentioned, somebody else, what?
Well, the thing is, if from your study it comes out, for example, some kind of regular thing, like some kind of pattern, you see it often, but at some place you want to be sure how often or how much, for example, then you have to gather quantitative data about some kind of facts, like how often this kind of thing happen, for example. And
Mm-hmm. So you in my scheme, I would call you in if I would take this logic you are explaining, so you embed the quantitative data collection, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that and for me, it's I purposefully was expecting that in ethnographic study, as this is long term itself, so it's quite uncommon to do something like that. that I did a long-term ethnographic study, and then after that I went to collect quantitative, even though you could imagine that I did this one case, one ethnographic study, got these patterns, and then I want to see if it works for the wider cultural context. So you could go for this scheme, so that you do the quantitative survey type of things. You cut your models here, like a descriptive or theoretical, more local theoretical models, and then you want to test or get the how typical this what I saw in this local cultural context, how typical it is, so that in that case I would get this kind of scheme. I finished my ethnography, got certain results which I use so that to get more information. If I do this, that within the same ethnographic study I also collect the qualitative. We were already talking, typically I did the interviews first, I did first I did the observation, then I did the interviews, and then I blended it with certain, very typically, especially in my field when we were talking about school context, school culture, for example, you as a researcher even doesn't have to do, because in the schools they do the test, they give the points, they give the grades, so you just use the information which is numeric, locally generated, but you can use it as your data and relate it to these other phenomena which you get from here, so that let's exclude this one, that if you start to do something like that, then in this mixed methods terminology, all these kind of designs have their labels I already used. Did you notice? You could use the label that it's embedded design. So I have generally qualitative framework, but I have embedded literally certain quantitative elements. At this simple case, I have embedded certain quantitative structure, data collection, and I most probably in this embedded design, do I want to integrate or not?
It depends what I want to do with that, or what kind of outcome I want to have, but probably not.
I would say the other way around, because this is the holistic. I want to get my main purpose here in this ethnographic design is to understand deeply this culture which is created in that local, so that whatever data I collect about the same thing, to put this holistic picture together, I want to. This is definitely the situation which calls for the heavy integration. So I get the results, how this part works, I get the results, and then I want to relate it, and I want to see how they interact, these logics behind these different things, that this kind of this is for me. So that again, if you would ask that if this kind of model would be used, and if somebody reports in this kind of ethnographic setting that my quantitative results are these and my qualitative results are these, and doesn't integrate, then I would say that, well, something is missing. That's not good piece of mixed methods research, because this logic calls for integration, to putting these different results from different data together and interpreting them as a whole. If I do this, first, let's say, purely qualitative ethnographic study, generate some frameworks, and then go for this to ask that if these patterns are valid for a wider population, then about integration, data integration. So there is an integration, but this is different time. You take the results and build up actually the quantitative. Do you find let's get to the purposes then to get the terminology. If I do it like that, this integration is there what? I use these results to build up the quantitative study. So that's what
Expansion.
I would call it, but it might be also the first thing is the development, but it doesn't have the expansion is as valid depending on, so that I said it's you can have both logics or 3 or 2 logics at the same time. So on the one hand you take these results, and on the basis of these results you build up, you design your sampling logic for the quantitative study, you design the instrument, probably the survey instrument for example, but at the same time you expand if you take this as a one project. So that
But
you can...
it really depends on the research question, what you have. So basically, well, if you need validation, for example, then the research question has to be quite a lot wider than just having it inside the, I mean, as a complementary part.
And in real life it might be that you were smart enough to start with the big questions which included this and this in the first phase, but in real life it might be that you started with the questions which actually lead you to do the ethnography only, and then when you have got the final results you have this a bit of this initiation thing, yes? And then you ask the new questions because you are smarter, you know more about this, and you are in a position to ask the new questions. And in that sense, there is no, like, if you finally say that it's one project, even if you didn't even dream of these questions in the very beginning, that's not a problem calling it the mixed method study. So
because
that,
in design, if you do, for example, kind of you have some kind of a design question, how should we do, for example, and you go for ethnography to understand at least understand more people and the area where this design should fit. Then you don't know what you're going to design anyway. So you have to find the pain points before with ethnographic study, and then you will have new questions if you have found the pain points.
Yeah, and that triggers me to even get. I already plotted this one, but I would if taking the bits and parts, then I would say that in that logic, the ethnographic study actually will be embedded or should or could be a part of the, yesterday I was giving the framework for the design research, so that if you have the basic idea from the beginning to design something, so that your big framework could be a design and the ethnographic kind of set of study could be this. Do you remember, or should I browse the analysis of the problem phase, so that you could choose to do the ethnography under this analysis initial phase of the study, then you go to design, and then you go to evaluating, so that you could even draw we need another type of these alternative designs, I would call like this, so that design research and action research kind of frameworks which are in between, so you could think that all of this is done within that another framework of design research, so that you can really have this within. But indeed, if you have once the design research, you have to keep your ethnographic study quite small scale. You can't do like you read these 2-year-long ethnographic studies, you will never end up with a problem. But let's do the experimental as well then, as a main. The main question was in experimental if there is this effect or influence which I expect. I start with hypothesis, I have a control group, maybe or at least pre and post testing, and usually then again I'm not browsing the but what else is typical about experimental design? in ethnographics design, you go to the field and you don't want to change or interrupt.
Well, in experimental design, you want to maybe control independent variables.
Yeah, exactly. You even might go to the true experiments are in the lab. You take the people out of the reality and put them to the lab. But if you do, if you are afraid or if you think in frames of losing the applicability in real life, if you do it all in the lab, it might well work. But does it work? Okay, you go to the field, but you still want to control every possible thing so that you change the reality, you introduce your treatment, and again, it's the terminology or these measures. So the compared to ethnography, it's the total different logic in that sense. And then you can. So experimental, as that box, did I draw a correct one? Yes. The quantitative logic is traditionally the data collection, usually in experiments.
You mean like
what type of data collection methods or techniques you usually use in
Measurement.
Measurement, the structured measurement, so that you get the numeric data, you do the tests, or you record the clicks, or you count things from the beginning, so that in that sense you do the quantitative data collection, usually maybe before and maybe after. So, did you discuss the typical problems with experimental designs, which could call for the thinking that maybe I can avoid these typical issues with experimental design if I integrate some qualitative aspects somehow into that? Any typical problems with experimental designs? I actually mentioned one already, the biggest one. If you take it too much out of the context, then it might work well statistically and everything is nice, but will ever anybody apply it in real life? Do I care as a researcher if they do? If I get my 1.1 publication, the top level publication, do I care? If I don't, then I don't even think further. But if I do care that my results would be actually applied somehow, then I start to think about the real life context more in experimental designs.
So it has to be replicable. Someone else has to do or has been able to do similar experiment with a similar outcome. So therefore, if you go to field, there's like too much you cannot really control. Nevertheless, if you are going to explain it in your, for example, in your study that these things might happen or did have occurred, then I guess you're fine with that.
But you can ask people to do some interviewing or surveying or this approach.
For what purposes?
To complement.
At what phase?
Expand.
To expand? So, okay, let me, I triggered at least some of you to think along, but as I see what happens is this treatment which is applied here, usually who and how it's developed. Experts. And as it has to be replicable, as you said, in traditional sense, it's what kind of? The other keyword is keep it minimalistic, do it short, do it sharp, and don't bother too much about real life complications. What ends up is, if you want to read what happens typically, then if you go to Moodle, you will find the author is Messer. You will see that there are these examples of studies. So what they did was that they, as experts, they wanted to help people to avoid, in America, somewhere in native communities, to make people more aware, the women especially, more aware of the cancer thing. They developed a program, they initiated an experimental design, thousands women. They went there, did their treatment, they gave them some information, they had some home visits, then they had the results, no change.
So therefore you want to have complementary research to understand why or what happened, why this treatment didn't work.
Exactly. They were very sure in the beginning that they will get their statistically significant results because they thought they were experts, so that they spent a lot of money, you can imagine, to do this like a real life. They went to people's homes, 2,000 people, several times, so that a lot of money. They ended up with unexpected, not significant results, and you can assume mostly these they won't get published, so they were brave at least to publish. What they did then, indeed, they had these question mark things. They added up what they did. They went back, they did some qualitative observation, and especially the qualitative interviews, and they got a lot of information about the background here. So that in experimental you said the other factors which could influence. Actually, they found out a lot of things which they should have known from the very beginning. So what we can learn from that example, that indeed at least they understood why it didn't work, but a lot of money was spent and actually no good for the still, even though they themselves understood why it didn't work and they could publish, they got their quite high level publication out of it, but for real life no good. So if you want to be not in that position, you care about actually getting these things so that they will work in real life as well. So
probably you would have to do like qualitative kind of research, like for example interviews before you're going to create your treatment.
Exactly. So you probably want to be thinking that I'm not such an expert, and if I care not only about the statistically significant results and scientific results, but if I care that it really starts to work, I don't think in terms that I'm the expert and I know. I probably want to not only interview but observe, to do the documentary research of the background, so that, and then on that basis, all kind of. So then I develop my, there is a developmental purpose, yes. I do this qualitative to actually develop the treatment so that it would be most, and I probably don't care so much of having it minimalistic and maybe even give up a little bit of replicability, because if I put for myself the emphasis to the other side, I want it to work in real life more than I want it to be traditional, in a traditional scientific sense, so that I do this qualitative part beforehand. What else I could do? Because if the real people are involved, if you think that if it starts to work or not after because in the experimental setting, what I do is that I'm going there, I'm motivating them, either giving money or either being myself, like a very enthusiastic, oh, let's do it. But if I'm out of the field, will they ever do it?
Might not.
Probably not, yeah. If I'm not having this, so that what I want to do is that probably in parallel, I want to collect So I do my experimental treatment, but I want to monitor the process. I want to understand, being within this situation, this treatment, what people think, how they make sense of it, to ask the questions, what are the triggers actually, what will make them to actually follow or be in that process. So I might again embed this kind of, it's more common in medical research, so that you can understand that on the one hand there is this medication which should have objective results, but at least in my worldview, the ways how people rationalize and think about if they feel comfortable or not, if they hide and then get this they just make the face that they actually did what you're told, but actually they didn't. So that you want to embed, and then indeed you can have all of this if you have enough resources. And in the end of the day, actually, if you think again, it's again actually becoming more close to what, if you start to think like that. I explored the first with the purpose to develop a more realistic treatment. Then I applied it, then I collected the information, the meta-information, how actually it was applied, and then I did the follow-up to see what's meaning. So I'm again going much closer to this. From that typical experimental design, I'm moving to design research approach. I might even do that several cycles, yes, if it's a real complicated situation. So, and this experimental situation is the evaluation stage, kind of, that I do the design, so the design is from the experimental, typical experimental setting, the design phase is totally missing, because we as experts, we even don't discuss it. We just knew the black box thing. But with that, then you have this big and more emphasis on this developing phase. You get the information and you get this totally new emphasis on that development design phase into that. And the experimental one will be still there, but it's a part of evaluation part, so that you get very reliable. So again, if you think of these mixed methods definitions, most of the typical mixed methods authors would call this study, at least not the typical mixed method study, if you take this design research, but the kind of gray area or mixed model study, because do we recall what was the most common definition you have? They kind of expect you to have but if you do this quantitative and qualitative data within the same phase, then it's like this most typical understanding of mixed method study, that in this one phase you have both data, quantitative and qualitative data. But even if you don't do this, for me that would be perfectly fine, like a mixed method study. Because you do first qualitative, then quantitative, again qualitative, maybe you get into cycles and change. So, so again, both ways, and you can do the other with the others, the same things. If you think instead of experimental here, the survey design, another qualitative or quantitative.
Well, with the survey design. It would be like nice to gather information with surveys about some kind of concrete facts already to understand how different people understand, for example, the same situation.
Yeah, well, with the survey design, it's first of all, in our context, it's a traditional quantitative design. It's semi-artificial or semi-controlled, but the main logic behind it is that sample and population. You want to have a smaller sample studied and you want to have your inferences to the bigger population. But again, in that sense it's quantitative, but you could, to have a good survey instrument, you could explore first qualitatively, and then in the end you might complement your results by qualitative case studies or interviews.
But you can also do vice versa to find out is there any this kind of happenings or situations out there, and then if you are sure that there are some, then you can go and have qualitative research about that.
So if we draw it, there will be a quantitative exploratory study to find, and then the case studies. And there is a developmental purpose to sample, to find the appropriate or interesting cases so that you will get this kind of models. Okay, as time is running, we haven't used any very heavy mixed methods terminology, but believe me, it's there. What was at least one term I used still? Started with embedded design. Yes, that was a one term from this mixed method. So I have embedded one data collection methods within the other frame. But indeed, all these schemes have their own labels and names, and unfortunately, not only one, but several possible, depending on the authors, so that we are already talking about this how, isn't it? And you see, you don't have to use this heavy, you just have to understand the logic, why you do it, what you believe behind these things, where you see the problems with the traditional designs. But indeed, if you want to present it as a mixed method study, you should get at least a glimpse into that world of mixed methods terminology, whether you like it or not. You can see that's just, we have had this multi-method studies, two-phase design. We have here two-phase design. It doesn't go here. We have three-phase design, maybe within. So that there are a lot of. I'm not getting into that scheme too much, but let me just pick up. That's also not very useful typology. Okay, let's take, this is the easiest. For me, this Tedley and Tashakori, and also the Creswell, if you want to start with an easy set of the mixed methods kind of designs and terminology, go for either Tedley and Tashakori or Creswell. There are others, but as we don't have too much time. Let's have a look. Parallel mixed methods designs. Does this label kind of clicks with some logic we were plotting here?
So if it's like, for example, in experimental design, you will gather also information qualitative way to understand if they applied what you asked them to apply. Then it's, or in this ethnography, it's if you like count something, you gather some qualitative.
So it's practically that you in parallel collect both, as it says, you collect both qualitative and quantitative data in parallel, but that's a tricky one in that sense that in parallel, in abstract sense, would mean that exactly the same time maybe, but it might be in time-wise like this, that I collected quantitative first and qualitative after, but what this parallel more means in logic is that there is no developmental purpose, so that these data collection phases are quite independent. So I don't learn. Here, if I draw like this, then it's, I got these results, and I learned from these results, and I designed this instrument, or this the other part of the study or based. If I talk about parallel designs, I mean that either two strategies or two data collection methods are used or applied in quite independent. And I start to integrate after when I have my data already, and then I might integrate on the data or even on the results level. So in time it doesn't really matter, but it starts to matter somehow if you have the same sample. That's exactly a very common question or worry in experimental designs. If you have the same sample for collecting quantitative and qualitative information, imagine if you have had with these people deep 2-hour open-ended interviews about the same topic, and then you go with your structured instrument. Can you really believe that this data collection is independent? So the question is that if you would do the quantitative data collection, would you have got the same data?
No, probably different results because people tend to act based what they know. So if you have already,
if you as a researcher have put them to think about issues for 2 hours, have had an interaction with them on this topic, in my worldview, never ever you would get the same topic. So, but in other certain frameworks, if you think differently about how the world works, some people seem to think that it's possible to have this, that it doesn't really matter which way I collect, but that's like, but at least you have to, depending on the framework, but you have to think about these things. So that sometimes time matters. If you do with the same sample, then you might want to have the different samples if you can't do them in the other. So.
If you only ask about like recent events, like about the facts, and you don't say why you are gathering this kind of information, then it's more likely that you change a bit less, but you still change, because if you like ask what did you do yesterday as a qualitative research, and people are telling
but that's
you,
not kind of true qualitative research anyway, so I would say that's something in the middle already, isn't it? Because but that's you compromise already from the richness of qualitative data. You could have had it quite, it's definitely sounds like a semi-structured, at least if you go for that minimalistic thing. So anyway, we don't have time, but yeah, that's one important topic. Then parallel segmental mixed designs, then it quite clearly says that one first, the other after. But again, just time doesn't make the label. If I didn't integrate any information from the first phase to the second, I already told I would call it parallel. The segmental comes with the idea that I do one first and I have a purpose to use this information to develop somehow the other one. And then I can have this, I develop the other one, but actually my purpose to have the other one is to come back to these results and to explain them better. So first I use the information to develop this instrument or this set of the part of the study, but then I go back with my new results and start to integrate here to answer the so that fine with these two. These should be easy, but people mess them up because the time seems to be the most important. But for me, the time is a thing to think about, but it's not the main one. Conversion mixed designs. We haven't been talking too much about that. At least as if I reflect.
It's like makes more sense to think that you gather the information qualitatively and then you're picking some quantitative
quite
data
typically this way. The transformation comes with this data level, so that you have initially the unstructured data, either interviews or unstructured observations, and then you gradually start to code, and you may end up with having a structured variables and statistical analysis. That's the most typical transformation, like you have initially. But you could have had from the beginning the quantitative data set or qualitative data set. You transform the qualitative and then you integrate, because you have transformed the qualitative into structured form, and you can use the variables together so that you can start to integrate. But actually, again, from my point of view, much more interesting is that actually it's possible the other way around as well. So you start with a quantitative data set, you do the grouping techniques. Anybody? If I talk about quantitative grouping techniques, you have the labels for me? What are the methods in quantitative side which help to group either subjects or either variables? Cluster analysis, factor analysis. So you get these typologies, and then you might have a narrative data, or you might want to have the narrative data, and you actually get to the abstract level with your quantitative. You forget about these t-tests and ANOVAs about statistical significance. You just take the typology, and then you start to build the narrative supported by the qualitative data, so that and you can tell that you have actually transformed this quantitative data into the qualitative form. So you have, for example, 3 or 4 narratives for different typologies, how their attitudes have developed, why they have developed what they have, and you never bother to give that if this one group is statistically significant from the other. Or how often these groups are actually represented, but you just describe they are there, their logic is like this. Somewhere on the background you have it that it's not only 2 people, because that the quantitative background says that there are enough of people of being typical for this or the other group.
But it's like interpretation then, or because if you have only like it depends what kind of information you collect qualitatively.
Absolutely. If you just say say that these were the 3 groups of this factor analysis or cluster analysis, and give on the basis the means and standard deviations behind that, that's definitely not a mixed method study, and that's definitely not transformation in that sense. But exactly if you reach to the point where you really integrate this, you purposefully collect this qualitative information to blend this quantitative basis, but the typology then. So it's all in continuum anyway, as I have suggested before. You have to feel the point where you can. Quite multi-level mixed designs if it's already there. It's kind of a bit different logic behind that, as it says, so that again, it's easier. Let's take the school as an example. So you want to study the school culture from very different. Who could be these levels then, which they use as an abstract?
Like roles, like students and teachers.
Yeah, exactly. The director or directorate, then the teachers, then the students, then the parents. Then maybe in some school there is this parents active group. In some schools it rules quite a lot of how the, especially in private schools, the parents, so that there are very different, but in any organization then. And then if you call it multi-level mixed design, that means that for example from the students you collect data by survey instrument or the structured questionnaire. Then from the director, what you do for the director the survey questionnaire?
No,
Probably.
interviews.
Probably not. Probably you will go for a quite open interview with one director. Then, but in the middle, then you would then think, and then you blend it again together so that to give the holistic understanding how this works. And it might end up being quite ethnographic or the case study, if it's like, do you feel the kind of, again on the continuum, the case study and the ethnographic study for me is on the continuum. Somewhere there is this balance point. If it's more a snapshot, I go there, I collect all the kind of, it's more like a case study. If I stay there, get into it deeply, so that's more ethnographic logic to the study.
There's like in ethnographic, there's like lots of case studies, but you know, if you take like one episode of ethnographic study, then it's like case study.
Okay. For me, it's more complicated because the case study is, again, as I mentioned already yesterday, a problematic term in that sense that very different people use it very differently. The worst use of the label of case studies, if which many people seem to use, is that if I can't use, if any other strategy level term doesn't fit, that it's not an ethnography, it's not a survey, it's not an experiment. Okay, it's a case study, but it's not so easy, at least from my point of view. Actually, to use the case study as a logical, there has to be some very concrete frame. Why do I call it a case? It's not just that I surveyed, I said this, I got the 20 teachers or 20 directors of the companies to agree to be interviewed, and that's a case study. Never mind, that's not anything close to case study. So the case study has to have, so that it's very close to experiment, actually, for it. But what's the difference is that in experimental design, this kind of setting is set by the researcher. In a case study, the setting is set up by the local people, and I'm, as a researcher, going to see that somehow either there is a reform or either there is some other time frame, but something has to be happening, starting, ending, having this logic of not just having 20 volunteers to talk to me. That's never a case study anyway. So quite clear with that multi-level design. Oh, don't bother about that word. Don't use this label, please. So that indeed you can end up with such a complicated or complex mixed method design that you get yourself lost and the others get lost as well. But fully integrated, 110% good. Don't claim that. So that sometimes these prominent people, I don't know why. They need to. There is this thought that if I have this typology, it has to be overwhelming, and if you do the last category, which could like contain whatever. But you could, if you are very convinced that you can. Anyway, there is another one which I don't use, find a very, but I mentioned the Creswell as well. We have exactly the time to tackle this one. So they have a bit different logic for their typology, but we have these examples from here anyway, so that they call the first one triangulation thing. let's recall what we have been talking about, the label of triangulation and how they use it, the short 2.5 rows. Do they use it in this label triangulation as originally the Tenzin did? If you read it.
No, it's more about just implementation than having same research question.
It's quite, if we recall, it's quite the same as a parallel design in the past one. It's definitely doesn't say that you could do this quantitative and qualitative methods within the same. You could do it for validation purposes, but this definition here definitely doesn't say that you only call it triangulation. But it could be complementarity, it could be expansion, it's still called triangulation design. So you already see that even those prominent people on the field use these terms now more flexibly than it was originally. So you can play around and find your way. How do you want to use it? But the main thing is to refer to the right authors. You choose the logic to use the terminology. Embedded design I have used already. Does it these two lines, does it go with the logic which I was telling before? So embedded, we had the basic one, or experimental, and in parallel here we collect the other type of data to support. So that's embedded design. So another label, explanatory design. We have an example on the we have this logic somewhere on the whiteboard?
Half of the experiment. The same
So
part.
yeah, if we skip this one, take this part, yes. So we have, but I have a big problem with the definition of this explanatory. I was wrong. It's not this.
It was like
This
the,
part,
yeah.
yes, sorry. So that if it's explanatory, I have the experiment first, got some puzzling results, and then I collect qualitative and explain the quantitative results. But for me, I can't see any reason why it can't be explanatory the other way around. So I have the qualitative first, and then I collect some quantitative information to explain the trends or the methods, so that it can be very easily, from my point of view, it doesn't be only this way, that quantitative first and then even though it might be in practice more typical.
But the next one is like the vice versa version of it, right?
Yeah, but this one again, because these words themselves, I explain what I did first, I collect something else to explain what I got first. The logic itself is different. Exploratory is that first I want to browse the field to do the other part properly. So, and again, I can't see why only this way, that if I do the exploratory, then it has to always be qualitative first and quantitative after. It very easily can be the other way around. We probably had this one. So we explore quantitatively what's there to pick up the proper cases, so that these which suit my research questions, so that this quantitative is for me definitely like an exploratory phase, and then I do the deep main research, so that you can use this, but indeed one way is more typical, the other way is maybe not so. Any questions to hear? So I don't bother you with, that's, you see, the fifth typology. I picked up 2 of them. There are more probably around, but if you want to, you can get into these others, like this one, which I don't find any use of. I can read it. Partially mixed concurrent ideal status design. Would it help you to learn from the paper that somebody starts there? I did a mixed method study with partially mixed concurrent ideal status design. I wouldn't like to have this information. I would like to have this information we started from why we did it, what do we combine. This label can stay. But if you like these kind of labels, logical labels, they are there. There are references to the authors. You can make use of them. I don't like these kind of labels. Any questions about these things? So unfortunately, we don't have time to talk more about how to integrate these sampling techniques or how to integrate actually these data collected and analyzed. But what we can do now, did you take these papers with you? Let's just have our 15 minutes with this one. Let's start with this one. I have one set. You can just have squeeze yourself together with somebody who has it. So.
It's just more.
Well.
This one.
So that's somebody's study presented in a schematic way. So the exercise for you is that just having this visualization of the study, first try to understand with a quick view from up to down and from down to up or left to right. Does it help you to understand what was done? And then the other thing is that on the basis of today's discussions, if you could suggest some changes, that it would be even easier. Okay, I will give you a little bit of time and you can discuss in the groups, 2 or 3 or how many there are, so that just try to browse, try to see how easy it is to understand what was done. I tried hard. At least they reacted adequately.
Well, it seems like they have wanted to create personas basically and to understand which are like similar people and they just kind of take the quantitatively and like
Physical analysis, they found 4 different groups, and then they just took some. It's a bit suspicious to me because they found 4 clusters in groups. But then they just no, they definitely didn't know that. This is what you get with quantitative analysis, where like here there's a sample of 10, so here's a representation of people from different clusters. No consideration whether you just generated it, but like it would be nice if it could be a bit bigger, or you could reduce each cluster would be represented with some of the people, you know, because now you probably have
16 or 12.
yeah, exactly, yeah. This is just a bit weird. There's some of the clusters where maybe 10 people and other clusters in
I'm trying to understand the data. I'm trying to
yeah, they just try to do the persona basically, so they would like cover everything in the company, just like basically 4 different scripted clusters.
Well, have you had a glimpse as we are running out of time? I'm interrupting. So they call it segmental. Is it segmental which looks from here? Quite clearly, you can do it like I did from left to right or from top to bottom, both work well. In this case, probably that they wanted to have this detailed information that putting it the other way would have been more complicated, so that's quite logical to have it this way. So if then segmental, which one was the first one and which one the second? First quantitative, then the qualitative phase. What was the purpose for combining these two in this way?
It serves as a means for sampling, statistical sampling. So how
Yeah, so that in this mixed methods terminology, there was definitely a development purpose. Yes, that the first phase was used to develop something in the other phase, so that the developmental or development purpose was definitely there, but they call it explanatory design. So is it like, does it show through that actually the main thing was still the first or the second?
The second
The-
one, the first.
The first was at least, I understand the time was so small, but the first one was the main, and then they wanted to complement with that, so that there are, actually it always comes, if you want to complement, then you have some kind of development, because you have to integrate the information from the before, so that it seems to be that the visual logic comes with the label they are using. They are having this segmental explanatory design, and they nicely plot all the methods, so you have all the information there. But then visually, could you suggest to have it much more? You want to have the scheme so that you have a quick look, and you as soon as possible you realize what's going on. Could you suggest something to even improve this? You could change the shape, isn't it? So that all the boxes, it's quite, you have to get into details, but if you would do like this, how many of them quantitative phases they... So you can have one quantitative box, but here it's quite, as you want to have so many details, you can divide the data collections.
There was like 4 quantitative and 4 qualitative. No, 3 qualitative and 1 where they just combined the results.
Couldn't you use something like that, isn't it? You see, the quantitative phase the development phase, which was important and stressed out differently, like this select participants based on quantitative results, yes? That's a kind of analytic phase between two of which integrates these two parts. And you could be creative and have it separated, because it's not like one set, the other set, and then you could have
the last one is also like it's not purely like qualitative or quantitative. It was like a combination of both or something.
I was trying hard now to be creative. I tried to combine these two shapes so that to visualize this integration, isn't it? And if I would have exactly the same information but visualized in this way, it would be even more easy. I have a glimpse on it, and if I keep to these traditions, which are, if somebody, so they are quite common logic, so that I will have a look, and I would have had even more quickly the kind of feeling what was actually done, so that you can learn from this. Indeed, at certain point, some people get too creative. They try to use different colors, and then for academic context, it gets sometimes a bit too. If it gets too colorful and too blinking, then you probably don't want to do that, at least in certain parts. But for certain, for example, if you want to present your results to school children or certain people, you might, otherwise they will all be in Skype, but if you kind of try to get their attention by blinking background and then talk what you want to talk, maybe that will work as well. So we still have 3 minutes. Let's do the other one, the from here, quickly. From the other paper down there.
That in this, no, what you draw between those, was it the combination or the?
This was the one phase, you can find it there, where they say that this is select participants based on quantitative results. So that was this. There was something between it which kind of connected the quantitative and qualitative. There was pointed out as a separate phase, which is very important to get a better feeling that how the integration between quantitative and qualitative have happened. So I'm very happy they have this box. Usually it's skipped, but you could just try to visualize it even more clearly.
Yeah, at the same time, and then they inserted the information from this part to the next phase. So basically, this is like phase 1, and this one like was phase 2, or this one was phase 3, like this one.
No, wouldn't you think that your problem is basically then you would have a people who were interviewed, and then you would account for the quantitative data and you have new questions. You would have some interviews where there's any questions whether it exists. But this is like you often this, I would first do this. Okay, first some questions and I would do this. Then I would go here and here. So it would be more like, it wouldn't be parallel. This is a bit more. I mean, can you do that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can do like, well, which is going to be first, because you're going to change the information what you're getting if you do
Exactly.
one after the other.
But this is like, but can you include? You probably can. I mean, even in interviews, as far as I know, like you can't really use some information and change it a bit, and then just change it because the information is then not comparable you get from the interviews, because the first ones are going to answer these different questions on the fifth round of interviews or something. So I don't know. Just decided to do it.
Okay. Well, you created just questions. You didn't actually do basically interviews yet.
Yeah.
So you just created some questions what you might want to know later on, and then you analyze kind of quantitative data, and then therefore
then you just get some idea what to study. But So, but are you, that's my question, are you in this case, like this picture drawn, it just looks like you're at the same time collecting quantitative data and collecting qualitative data, and then after you collect qualitative data, you just go back and you change the protocol for the
No,
interview.
because the interviews, not before that.
So it actually goes like this, you know, this is okay, and then this,
Yeah.
this, and then this, so it's actually not parallel per se.
So basically, you did this because you wanted to structure the design or understand better what you are going to ask later. Then you created the collected qualitative data, and then you modified the same interview question because you added some new one, you put it here, and then you actually need the interviews and.
Yeah, and then you just get some idea what it is telling you, and then you combine it with again the results of that. If you answer something, you make some inferences about leadership or whatever.
So the main phases have 1, 2, 3, phase 3, and 4, I guess. Well, no, yeah. But this one is definitely phase 2. This one.
Yeah.
There's a
This is
pre-phase.
Yeah, pre-phase something.
And then you just combine them.
Well, what is this? What is this called? Design. Is this triangular or what is this? Or is this a different page? No, this is the sequential.
Well, I'm sorry, we are out of time. But you can play on with this. It was complicated, wasn't it? The only text, indeed, you have. Otherwise, indeed, you have the full article. But exactly my point is, if you want to do the visual thing, so you should try hard and test it on the others, how it would be most easily understandable, because visually what happens if I look at that one, this is the highest one as the arrowscope. So initially this one comes, the first thought is that this was the first thing to be done. Actually, if you learn into that, if you would have had time, you learn that this one was the thing they did first. Then this kind of arrow takes you to this one, and then you integrate. But if you look here, it's the same thing, but my version of it. Not from top down, but from left to right at that point of time. But that's kind of choice again to. So now I very clearly see that it starts with the quantitative. You can draw 1 or 3 boxes. That's like so. Then I have put this parallel thing for this qualitative, so that one arrow, the one input comes from that quantitative, what they wanted, and there was a certain part which came from theory or from the previous knowledge. So they put them together into one instrument. They had this qualitative phase. You see that segmental, which they call, they had the segmental design, like first phase, second phase, and then not only that they used this information from quantitative, but they took these results or even data into the phase integrated, so that it's up to you indeed to play around, and you might say that this was clearer and easier plot to understand than this one, but indeed I wouldn't have plotted it if I wouldn't be convinced that I would have this kind of visual model would help me much sooner. Even for me, that took a lot of time actually to re-visualize it, let's say, so that I could understand what actually was going on. Indeed, if you want to get the details, why it was done and so on, you get into the database. But anyway, so at least even if you don't do in traditional article, you might not be allowed to do this one as a part of the article, but for the PhD project, I'm pretty sure you will be, and people will appreciate if you do it properly, or at least as an appendix so that the people, especially if you do the mixed method studies, but more complicated the design gets, the more important it is that you try to first plot it for yourself, because quite often when I read as an editor the papers, at least I get the feeling that they didn't really understand themselves what phrase and why they did it. But if you start to visualize it for yourself and ask the questions, how it's integrated, if it has to be integrated, what feeds into what, then you can decide. If you just use it for yourself to make sense and then be able to have your text as clear so that the people read the text only and understand, or you can have this visual plot as well. So now we are out of time for this module as I see, so hope I didn't get you too puzzled, positively puzzled, so that you will go on and read more to really understand and get the details.
Thank you very much.